Picture yourself on a quiet shore, the waves whispering against the sand. You reach down and scoop up a handful of fine, warm grains. You close your fist around it, wanting to keep it, to possess this small piece of the beach. But a strange thing happens. The tighter you squeeze, the more desperately you try to hold on. The faster the sand streams through the gaps between your fingers, until your hand is empty and all you are left with is the ache of your own effort. This simple act, this handful of sand, is a quiet mirror to our lives. We do this every day, not with sand, but with things far more vital. We clench our fists around our job titles, believing they define us. We cling to the ghost of a relationship that has long since faded, replaying memories like a favorite, sorrowful song. We hold on to the sting of old wounds, allowing them to shape the person we are today. We grip a detailed blueprint for our future, a future that never unfolds exactly as planned, and we feel a constant sense of failure when reality deviates from our script. And in all this holding, this desperate clenching, we find ourselves not secure but exhausted. We live with a constant, low hum of anxiety, a feeling that things are never quite right, a subtle friction against the flow of life itself. We are at war with the present moment, constantly trying to bend it to our will, to make it conform to the sandcastle of our desires. But what if the answer is not to squeeze harder? What if the path to peace is not found in a tighter grip, but in the gentle, courageous act of uncurling our fingers? This is the heart of an ancient wisdom, a path offered not as a passive surrender, but as a profound and active acceptance of reality. It suggests that freedom is not found in fighting what is, but in learning to understand it, to meet it, and to move with it. It does not promise to remove the challenges of life, but it offers a way to navigate them without being broken by them. It is an invitation to learn a deep and healing practice, the profound and timeless art of letting go. We begin our journey not by looking outward at the world, but by turning our attention inward to a feeling so common, so pervasive, that many of us have simply accepted it as a non-negotiable part of being alive. It is the feeling of being burdened. It is a quiet heaviness, a sense of being weighed down, even when, on the surface, everything seems to be going well. To understand this, imagine that from a very young age, you were given a backpack to wear, and throughout your life, you have been placing stones into it, one by one. You didn't always notice you were doing it. When a deep regret lodged itself in your heart, you picked up a stone and placed it inside. When a bitter grudge took root, in went another stone, sharp and jagged, an expectation for your career, a rigid hope for how your children should be, a fear of growing old, a painful memory you refused to release. Each one became another stone, another piece of weight added to the load. After years of this, the backpack has become incredibly heavy. It affects how you walk, how you stand, how you breathe. It is the first thing you feel in the morning and the last thing weighing on you at night. But here is the strangest part. You have been carrying it for so long, you have forgotten you are even wearing it. The weight has become normalized. The constant strain on your shoulders, the ache in your back, you no longer identify it as a burden you are carrying. You simply call it life. You believe this is just how it feels to be an adult, to be a person in the world. The fatigue, the tension, the low-grade stress, it all feels like an inevitable consequence of existence. But the wisdom of the Buddhist path begins with a radical suggestion that this weight is not mandatory, that the backpack can be examined, and that the stones, one by one, can be taken out. This invisible weight has a name. In the language of the Buddha, it is called upadana, which translates as clinging or attachment. And recognizing the nature of this clinging is the first essential step toward finding true freedom. When we hear the word clinging, our modern minds often jump to material possessions. We think of clinging to our cars, our houses, our money, or the latest technology, and this is certainly one layer of it. We attach our sense of security and identity to the things we own. We feel a surge of pleasure when we acquire something new, and a pang of fear at the thought of losing it. But the Buddhist understanding of clinging goes far, far deeper. It points to the subtle and powerful ways we attach ourselves to every aspect of our experience. We cling to pleasant sensations. Think of the perfect meal, the perfect vacation, the perfect moment of peace. Our mind grasps onto that memory and then tries desperately to replicate it. We are no longer experiencing the meal in front of us now. We are comparing it to the memory of that perfect meal, and we feel a subtle disappointment. We have clung to a fleeting sensory experience, and in doing so, we have sown the seeds of dissatisfaction. Even more powerfully, we cling to our ideas and our views. We hold on to our political affiliations, our social theories, our beliefs about right and wrong, as if they were extensions of our own body. We wrap our identity around them, and when someone challenges our viewpoint, it feels like a personal attack. We enter conversations not to understand, but to defend, to win, to prove that our map of the world is the correct one. This clinging to views is a primary source of conflict, both internally and in the world. It closes our minds and hardens our hearts, preventing us from seeing the humanity in those who see the world differently. We cling to our roles, to our sense of self. I am a father. I am a success. I am a failure. I am a victim. I am a survivor. These stories we tell ourselves about who we are can be useful, but they can also become prisons. When we cling to a single identity, we become rigid. We fear any information that contradicts that story. A person who clings to the identity of a success will live in constant terror of failure. A person who clings to the identity of a victim may unknowingly filter all of their experiences through that lens, unable to see their own agency and strength. We are clinging to a static photograph of ourselves in a universe that is a constantly flowing river. Most paradoxically of all, we even cling to our pain. We nurse our grievances. We rehearse our anger. The story of how we were wronged becomes a familiar, heavy cloak that we refuse to take off. The pain, in a strange way, becomes a part of our identity. It gives us a sense of righteousness, a story to tell. To let go of that anger, to let go of that hurt, would feel like losing a part of ourselves. So we carry the stone of that old wound, feeling its familiar, painful weight in our backpack every single day. This clinging, this upadana, is the source of the invisible weight. To illustrate this with perfect clarity, there is a timeless Zen story. Two monks, one senior and one junior, were on a long pilgrimage. For many days they walked, their path eventually leading them to a river whose banks had overflowed from recent heavy rains, turning the road into a wide expanse of thick, deep mud. Near the riverbank, a young woman in a beautiful silk kimono stood in distress. She needed to get to the other side, but was afraid of ruining her fine clothes in the treacherous mud. Without hesitation, the senior monk approached her, bent down, and motioned for her to climb onto his back. He then lifted her with ease, waded through the thick brown mud to the other side of the road, and gently set her down. She bowed gratefully and went on her way. The monk wiped his hands and continued his journey. The junior monk, however, was aghast. He was speechless with indignation. He knew the monastic rules by heart, a long list of prohibitions, one of the most serious being that a monk must never touch a woman. For hours they walked on in silence, but the junior monk's mind was a storm of judgment and confusion. He replayed the scene over and over, the beautiful woman, the senior monk's hands, the casual way he had broken such a sacred vow. The more he thought about it, the angrier he became. His own backpack of rules and righteousness felt heavier than ever. Finally, as they approached their temple in the evening, the junior monk could contain himself no longer. He burst out, "Brother, I have to ask you, how could you do that? Our vows are sacred. We are forbidden from touching a woman, yet you lifted one and carried her in your arms." The senior monk looked at his younger companion with a calm, compassionate expression. He paused for a moment and then said softly, "I left the woman by the river hours ago. Are you still carrying her?" This story reveals the heart of our problem. The senior monk had a physical burden for a few minutes, and then he let it go completely. The event was over. The junior monk had no physical burden at all, but he created a mental one. He clung to the idea of what happened, to his judgment of it, to his rules about it, and he carried that heavy mental burden for miles and miles turning a simple act of compassion into his own personal suffering. We are all the junior monk. We carry events, conversations, and feelings long after they are gone. We carry the argument from yesterday into our breakfast this morning. We carry the fear of a future meeting into our peaceful walk in the park. The event itself is the woman by the river. It is brief and it passes. Our clinging to the event is the long, agonizing journey that follows. This is the mechanism of our suffering. Reality is simply what is. It is the river, the woman, the muddy road. Clinging creates a second reality, a story in our heads about how things should have been or should be. The promotion we deserved, the apology we never received, the sunny weather we expected for our vacation. The space between reality as it is and the story we cling to is the gap where suffering is born. The wider that gap, the more intense our pain. If our expectation is held lightly, as a preference, the gap is small and the disappointment is fleeting. But if our expectation is a rigid demand, a stone we have placed in our backpack, then when reality does not conform, the gap is a chasm and our suffering is immense. The freedom that Buddhism offers is not a magic wand to make reality conform to our desires. It is the wisdom to stop creating the gap. It is the skill of letting go of our rigid stories, of taking the stones out of the backpack. The first step is simply recognizing the weight. Feel it now. The tension in your neck, the tightness in your stomach, the furrow in your brow. That is the feeling of clinging. That is the invisible weight. Now that we have seen this weight, now that we have felt its heaviness in our own lives, we must ask a deeper question. Why is this a fundamental part of the human experience? Why is this clinging so universal? To answer this, we must turn to the first great truth that the Buddha articulated, a truth that is not a pessimistic judgment, but a brave and compassionate diagnosis of our shared condition. It is the truth of our fundamental dissatisfaction, the truth of dukkha. Having recognized the invisible weight we carry, the backpack filled with the stones of our clinging, we are led to a fundamental question. Why? Why is this experience of burden so common, so deeply woven into the fabric of our lives? To answer this, we must turn to the very foundation of the Buddha's teaching. Imagine a physician, one of extraordinary compassion and wisdom. When a patient comes to this physician, sick and in pain, the physician does not begin with false promises or distracting pleasantries. The first step is always a clear, honest, and unflinching diagnosis of the ailment. This is precisely how the Buddha began. He looked deeply into the human condition and articulated what he saw in a simple, profound statement. This statement is the first noble truth, the truth of dukkha. The word dukkha is often translated from the ancient Pali language as suffering. But this single English word is too narrow, too heavy, with connotations of dramatic tragedy. To truly understand, we must broaden our perspective. Dukkha is not just the agony of a terrible loss or a painful disease. It is also the subtle friction of everyday life. It is the feeling that things are slightly out of joint, the background hum of dissatisfaction, the sense of being unfulfilled, the stress of things not going our way. It is the inherent unsatisfactoriness of a life lived in resistance to reality. The Buddha, like that master physician, identified three distinct types of dukkha, each one more subtle than the last. The first type is the most obvious, the one nobody can deny. It is the suffering of suffering, dukkha dukkha. This is the overt pain of life. It is the pain of birth, the pain of sickness, the pain of growing old, and the pain of death. Think of the fragility of your own body. It is susceptible to injury and illness. It ages, its senses dim, its strength fades, regardless of how much we wish it wouldn't. This is dukkha. It is the grief you feel when you lose someone you love, a pain so sharp it feels like a physical wound. It is the anguish of being separated from people and places that bring you joy. It is the deep frustration of not getting what you want, whether it's a job, a relationship, or a simple desire for a peaceful day. It's the stress of having to endure what you dislike, from a difficult colleague to a chronic illness. This is the raw, undeniable pain of life's sharp edges. We all know this suffering. It requires no deep philosophy to recognize it. It is the tearful reality of our vulnerable existence. The second type of dukkha is more subtle and perhaps more pervasive. It is the suffering of change, viparinama dukkha. This is the suffering that is cleverly hidden inside our happiness. Imagine you are holding a perfect, glistening soap bubble. It is beautiful, shimmering with all the colors of the rainbow. You are captivated by it, but in the back of your mind, there is a quiet tension, because you know with absolute certainty that at any moment it will pop. That tension, that awareness of the impending end of a beautiful thing, is viparinama dukkha. Our pleasant experiences are just like that soap bubble. The most wonderful vacation must come to an end. The most delicious meal is over in a few bites. The peak of health and youth inevitably fades. The initial bliss of a new romance matures and changes into something different. The happiness we derive from these things is real, but it is temporary. The suffering arises because we cling to them. We try to grasp the soap bubble, to make the vacation last forever, to freeze time in a moment of perfect joy. And because the fundamental law of the universe is change, our attempt is always doomed to fail. Life flows, and our resistance to that flow is what hurts. The pain is not in the joy itself, but in the impermanence of that joy and our desperate, anxious clinging to it. It is the bittersweet taste in every happy moment, the quiet fear of loss that shadows our love. The third type of dukkha is the deepest and most challenging to grasp. It is the suffering of conditioned existence, sankhara dukkha. This is the baseline, background hum of dissatisfaction that is woven into the very fabric of being a self. Imagine you are driving a car with wheels that are just slightly out of balance. Even on a perfectly smooth, straight highway, you feel a constant, subtle vibration through the steering wheel. The road is fine, the car is running, but something is not quite right. That constant, underlying vibration is sankhara dukkha. It arises because what we call a self is not a solid, stable entity. It is a temporary collection of constantly changing parts, a process, not a thing. Our body, our feelings, our thoughts, our perceptions, our consciousness, they are all in a state of perpetual flux. There is an inherent unreliability and instability to our very existence. This is the source of our background anxiety, the existential angst that can surface on a quiet Sunday afternoon when there is nothing obviously wrong. It's the restless feeling that drives us to constantly seek distraction, to check our phones, to fill the silence. It is the deep, nagging sense that something is missing even when we have everything we thought we wanted. It is the fundamental stress of being a fragile, temporary self in a vast, impersonal, and ever-changing universe. To understand how acknowledging this truth can be liberating rather than depressing, we turn to one of the most moving stories in the Buddhist tradition, the story of a woman named Kisa Gotami. Kisa Gotami was a young mother whose first and only child, a little boy, had fallen ill and died. Consumed by a grief so profound it bordered on madness, she refused to accept his death. Clutching the tiny, lifeless body to her chest, she went from house to house, desperately begging for medicine that could bring her son back to life. Some people mocked her, others turned away in pity, but no one could help. Finally, a wise man saw her desperation and, taking pity on her, directed her to the one person he thought might have an answer, the Buddha. She rushed to the Buddha, laid her child at his feet, and explained her quest. The Buddha looked at her not with judgment, but with immense compassion. He did not dismiss her. Instead, he said, "There is only one way to heal your son. You must go back into the village and bring me a single mustard seed. But it must be taken from a house where no one has ever lost a child, a spouse, a parent, or a friend." Filled with a sudden surge of hope, Kisa Gotami began her journey once more. At the first house, a kind woman readily offered her a handful of mustard seeds, but when Kisa Gotami asked her vital question, the woman's face fell. "O lady," she said, "the living are few, but the dead are many. Do not remind me of my deepest grief. I lost my husband just last year." Kisa Gotami went to the next house, and the next, and the next. The story was always the same. Every family had mustard seeds to spare, but every family had been touched by death. One had lost a daughter, another a father, another a beloved cousin. The phrase she heard again and again echoed in her mind, "The living are few, but the dead are many." As she walked from door to door, a profound transformation began to take place. Her sharp, personal, isolating grief started to dissolve into a vast, universal understanding of sorrow. She was not alone. This experience of loss was not a unique curse visited upon her. It was the shared, inescapable truth of human life. The weight of her personal tragedy was lightened by the realization of a common humanity. She finally understood. She took her son's body to the charnel ground and returned to the Buddha, empty-handed, but with a heart full of wisdom. "Have you brought the mustard seed?" the Buddha asked. "The work of the mustard seed is done, my lord," she replied. "Give me a place of refuge." She had directly experienced the first noble truth. She understood dukkha. This is why the first noble truth is not a message of pessimism. It is a message of profound realism and compassion. It is the doctor looking at our collective human condition and saying, "Yes, there is an ailment. Let us not pretend it isn't there." To deny dukkha is to live in a state of delusion, constantly fighting against the very nature of reality. It is to be like Kisa Gotami in the beginning, running frantically in search of a cure that doesn't exist. To accept dukkha is to become like Kisa Gotami at the end, calm, wise, and ready for true healing. It is the first essential step. It unites us in our shared experience and turns us from panic victims into sober students of our own lives. By bravely acknowledging the diagnosis, we empower ourselves to ask the next and most hopeful question. If this is the condition, then what is its cause? For the wise physician does not just diagnose an illness, he also identifies its origin so that a true cure can be found. We stand now at a crucial juncture in our journey. With the clear-eyed compassion of a master physician, the Buddha has given us a diagnosis for our fundamental dis-ease, the truth of dukkha. We have acknowledged the invisible weight, the subtle and overt suffering that permeates our lives. An honest diagnosis is the first step, but it naturally leads to a vital question: what is the cause? If a physician only described your symptoms without investigating their origin, you would receive no true healing. The Buddha, in his profound wisdom, did not stop at the diagnosis. He looked deeper, past the symptoms, to find the single, powerful root from which our suffering grows. This discovery is the second noble truth, the truth of the origin of suffering. And that origin, he stated, is an unrelenting, insatiable force within us called tanha. Tanha is a Pali word that is often translated as craving or desire. But again, these English words can be misleading. Tanha is not the gentle preference for a sunny day over a rainy one, nor is it the skillful desire to be a kind person. Tanha is more primal, more urgent. The most accurate translation is thirst. Think of the desperation of a person lost in the desert, tormented by a burning, all-consuming thirst. It is not a polite preference for water. It is a compulsive, feverish, life or death drive that hijacks the mind and body. This is the energy of tanha. It is the engine that powers the endless cycle of wanting, getting, feeling briefly satisfied, and then wanting again. It is the deep, internal itch that we are always trying to scratch. The Buddha identified this powerful thirst as having three distinct forms, each one contributing to the weight in our backpack. The first, and most familiar, is the thirst for sense pleasures, kama-tanha. This is the constant pull of our sixth sensesight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and even mind, which craves pleasant thoughts and ideas. In our modern world, this form of thirst is not just a personal failing, it is an industry. Our entire consumer culture is a massive, sophisticated engine designed to create, stimulate, and promise to satisfy kama-tanha. Think of the endless scroll on your social media feed, your eyes thirsting for the next image, the next video, the next hit of novel information. Think of binge-watching a television series, your mind thirsting for the resolution of the next plot point. We thirst for the taste of new foods, the feeling of new clothes, the sound of new music, the scent of a new perfume. Advertisements rarely sell a product. They sell the promise of quenching a thirst. They promise that this car will bring you freedom. This watch will bring you status. This vacation will bring you lasting happiness. But the satisfaction is always fleeting. The new car becomes old. The pleasure of the meal fades. The vacation ends. And the moment the satisfaction wanes, the underlying thirst returns, often stronger, now looking for its next target. This constant chase to please our senses, to find the next pleasurable experience, keeps us in a state of perpetual restlessness. We are always looking outside of ourselves for the next thing that will make us feel whole, at least for a moment. To understand the treacherous nature of this thirst, imagine you are adrift on a life raft in the middle of a vast ocean under a blistering sun. Your throat is cracked and dry, and you are tormented by a desperate, agonizing thirst for water. All around you is an endless supply of cool, clear liquid. In your desperation, you scoop up the ocean water with your hands and drink it deeply. For a single, fleeting moment, the feeling of liquid in your mouth feels like salvation. But then, a horrific transformation occurs. The salt floods your system, and a new thirst erupts, 1,000 times more intense and painful than before. The very thing you used to quench your thirst has become a poison that intensifies it. You are now in a far worse state than when you began. This is a perfect metaphor for tanha. Every time we give in to a compulsive craving, every time we chase a fleeting pleasure to numb our inner emptiness, we are drinking salt water. We get a moment of apparent relief, but we are reinforcing the underlying mechanism of thirst itself. We are teaching our mind that the way to deal with discomfort is to grasp for something outside, and so the habit of craving grows stronger, and our fundamental thirst deepens. The second form of thirst is more subtle, but even more powerful. It is the thirst for existence, or for becoming, known as bhavatana. This is not just the thirst for a specific pleasure. It is the deep existential thirst for life itself to continue, for our identity to be solid, real, and permanent. It is the ego's desperate desire to be something, to become something, to achieve a lasting state of security. This is the thirst that fuels our ambition, not for the joy of the work, but for the identity of a successful person. It is the thirst that drives us to build a legacy, to be remembered, to carve our name into the world so that we might in some way cheat death. Bhavatana is the source of the phrase, "I will be happy when." I will be happy when I get the promotion, when I get married, when I buy the house, when I retire. We are projecting our possibility for peace into a future version of ourselves, clinging to the idea of becoming a person who is finally free from problems. This thirst for existence is what makes us fight so hard against endings. We don't want the party to be over. We don't want to grow old. We cling to our youth, our health, our relationships, desperately trying to hold them in a fixed state, resisting the natural flow of life, which is constant change. It is the exhausting, impossible project of trying to build a permanent fortress on the shifting sands of time. The third form of thirst is the shadow of the second. It is the thirst for non-existence or for annihilation, vibhava tanha. This is the energy of aversion. When we cannot get what we want, the object of our thirst for pleasure or existence, our thirst turns in the opposite direction. It becomes a powerful urge to destroy, to push away, to annihilate the unpleasant feeling, person, or situation that is causing us pain. This is the fuel for our anger and hatred. When someone insults us, the desire to verbally lash out, to destroy their argument or their reputation, is vibhava tanha. When we feel deep shame or sadness, the impulse to numb ourselves with alcohol, drugs, or mindless distraction is a thirst to annihilate the painful feeling. We want it to be gone. At its most extreme, this thirst for non-existence can manifest as self-destructive behavior, and even the desire for suicide, driven by the false belief that annihilating the self will annihilate the suffering. It is a thirst for an ending, a craving for oblivion. But it is still a thirst, an active, violent resistance to what is. And like the other forms of tanha, it only leads to deeper suffering. It is another form of drinking salt water, a desperate act that worsens the very condition it seeks to cure. These three, thirst for pleasure, for existence, and for non-existence are the secret engine humming beneath the surface of our lives, keeping the wheels of dukkha in motion. It is crucial to understand that the Buddhist path is not about becoming a passionless stone devoid of all desire. The desire for food when you are hungry, the desire for safety for your family, the desire to be a kinder persontis are skillful and healthy energies known as chanda. The problem is not desire itself, but tanha, the compulsive, obsessive, addictive quality of thirst. The desperate feeling that I must have this to be happy, or I must get rid of this to be happy. The path to freedom is not about waging a war against all our desires. It is about developing wisdom. It is the practice of observing this thirst when it arises in the laboratory of our own mind. It is about learning to see the salt water for what it is before we drink it. We have now identified the engine of our discontent, this powerful, three-headed thirst called tanha. But why is this engine always running? And why does it never reach a final, peaceful destination? Why is the thirst ultimately unquenchable? The answer lies not in the nature of the thirst itself, but in the very landscape through which it travels, the very fabric of reality it tries to grasp. To understand why craving is always doomed to leave us wanting more, we must look deeply into the fundamental law of the universe, a truth that, once truly seen, changes everything. This is the truth of constant, unrelenting change, the truth of impermanence. We have now journeyed to the source of our inner turmoil. We have seen that the diagnosis for our condition is dukkha, the pervasive sense of dissatisfaction and stress. And we have discovered its cause, the powerful, relentless engine of tanha, the thirst for things to be different than they are. We are driven by a thirst for pleasure, a thirst for existence, and a thirst for non-existence. But this raises a crucial question. Why is this engine always running? Why is the thirst never permanently quenched? Why does drinking the salt water of our cravings only ever make us thirstier? The answer is not found by looking at the nature of the thirst itself, but at the nature of the world the thirst tries to grasp. The answer lies in a truth so fundamental, so all-encompassing, that we often fail to see it, like a fish that is unaware of the water in which it swims. This is the truth of impermanence. In the language of the Buddha, it is called Anicca. Anicca is the universal law that everything is in a constant state of flux. Nothing is static. Nothing is permanent. The entire universe, from the grandest galaxy to the most fleeting thought, is an unfolding, dynamic process, not a collection of fixed and solid things. Our suffering arises from a fundamental mismatch. Our mind, driven by thirst, attempts to grasp and hold on to things as if they were permanent, in a universe where nothing is. We are trying to build a solid house with flowing water. The friction, the struggle, the inevitable failure of this project is the very essence of our self-inflicted pain. To truly understand this, we can observe Anicca operating on three distinct levels of our experience. First, there is the gross, obvious level of impermanence in the world around us. We see the seasons turn, from the green shoots of spring to the stark branches of winter. We know that mountains, the very symbols of permanence, are slowly being worn down by wind and rain. The stars we see in the night sky are not eternal. They are born, they burn, and they eventually die. The city you live in is not the same city it was 50 years ago, and it will be different again in 50 more. The device you are using to watch this was once nothing more than raw materials buried in the earth, and one day it will be little more than dust. Every object you own, everything you see, is in a slow motion process of becoming and unbecoming. We might intellectually know this, but we live as if it weren't true. We accumulate possessions as if they will last forever and bring us permanent security. Second, and more intimately, we can see Anicca in our own lives and our own bodies. Your body is perhaps the most personal and undeniable teacher of impermanence. You were once an infant, then a child, then an adolescent, and now an adult. The face that looks back at you from the mirror is not the same face from a decade ago. Your cells are in a constant state of dying and being replaced. Your physical and mental abilities shift and change over your lifetime. Our lives themselves are a testament to Anicca. Our relationships evolve. Some deepen, some fade away. Our careers begin, they progress, and they end. Our children are born, they grow up, and they begin their own lives. Our existence is a continuous series of hellos and goodbyes. We are constantly arriving in new moments and leaving old ones behind. The suffering arises when we resist this flow. We cling to youth as old age approaches. We cling to our children as they were, unwilling to accept the adults they have become. We cling to a past version of a relationship, refusing to see what it is right now. Third, and most profoundly for our practice, is the microscopic level of impermanence within our own minds. If you sit quietly for even a few moments and watch your own mind, you will witness a torrent of change. A thought about work arises, unbidden. It lingers for a second, and then it is replaced by a memory from childhood. Then a feeling of boredom appears, which is quickly swept away by a wave of anxiety about a future task. An itch on your nose draws your attention, then a sound from outside. Your inner world is not a calm, stable place. It is a flickering, chaotic, and ceaseless stream of mental events. Feelings, thoughts, perceptions, and moods are like clouds in the sky, constantly forming, changing shape, and dissolving. There is no solidity. There is no permanence. Our mind is a process, not a thing. When we fail to see this, we make a critical error. We grasp onto a pleasant thought or a happy feeling and try to hold on to it. When it inevitably vanishes, we feel a sense of loss. We are assaulted by a painful memory or a fearful thought, and we desperately try to push it away, forgetting that it too is impermanent and will pass if we let it be. We are constantly trying to curate and control a process that is, by its very nature, uncontrollable. There is a saying attributed to the ancient Greek philosopher Heraclitus that perfectly encapsulates this truth. No man ever steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river and he's not the same man. Life is this river. The water flowing past you now is fresh, new water, never to be seen again. The riverbanks are subtly eroding and changing, and you, the person stepping into the water, are also different. The cells in your body are different. Your thoughts are different from the moment before. Everything is in flow. Our mistake, the source of our dukkha, is that we don't want a river, we want a lake. We want to dam the river, to stop its flow, to create a placid, predictable pool where everything stays the same. We want to keep the sunny, pleasant parts of the river pooled around us forever, and we want to build a diversion to push the murky, difficult parts away before they reach us. We spend our entire lives in this exhausting, futile conflict with the river's fundamental nature, which is simply to flow. There is a beautiful story that illustrates the wisdom of accepting this flow. A great king was a man of intense emotions. When his armies were victorious, he would be overcome with triumphant pride that bordered on arrogance. When his kingdom was struck by drought or his plans failed, he would be plunged into a deep, dark despair. Weary of these wild swings, he summoned the wisest minds in his court. "I want you to craft me a ring," he commanded, "a very special ring. It must contain a message etched into it that has the power to temper my joy in times of victory and to give me solace and hope in times of utter defeat. It must be a message that is always true and always relevant." The wise men were perplexed, but after much deliberation, they presented the king with a simple gold band. The king looked at it. Engraved on the inside were 4 simple words: "This too shall pass." From that day on, the king used the ring as his guide. When he would win a great battle and feel his ego swell with pride, he would secretly touch the inscription on his ring and remember, "This too shall pass," and he would be returned to a state of humility. When a terrible famine struck his land and he felt crushed by despair, he would look at the message on his ring and find the strength of endurance, knowing that the hardship, like everything else, was not a permanent condition. "This too shall pass." This simple phrase is the very essence of Anicca, and it is not a message of pessimism. It is a profound tool for perspective. It drains the catastrophic end-of-the-world energy from our pain, and it punctures the inflated, self-important bubble of our triumphs. It reminds us that our current state, whether pleasant or painful, is temporary. This understanding is deeply liberating. Our initial reaction to the idea of impermanence might be one of sadness. Everything I love will end, and that is true. But the other side of the coin is also true. Everything that causes me pain will also end. The grief you are feeling right now is not a life sentence. The anxiety that tightens your chest, the anger that burns in your stomach, the deep sense of failure, they are all subject to the law of Anicca. They are clouds, not the sky. They will pass. This knowledge is a source of immense hope and resilience. Furthermore, embracing impermanence invites us to live more fully in the present moment. If this moment is all we truly have, if it will never come again in exactly the same way, it suddenly becomes incredibly precious. We stop taking our lives for granted. We might listen more deeply to our loved ones, knowing that conversations are fleeting. We might taste our food more consciously, knowing the pleasure is temporary. We appreciate the simple warmth of the sun on our skin because this particular moment of warmth will never be repeated. Anicca transforms life from a frantic project of accumulating and holding on into a graceful practice of appreciating and letting go. Our suffering, then, is not caused by change, it is caused by our resistance to change. A resistance fueled by the deep thirst of tanha to find something solid, something permanent to hold on to in a universe of flux. We are trying to grasp the wind. We are trying to hold the river. We have now seen that everything around us is changing, and everything inside us is changing. This naturally leads us to the most profound and unsettling question of all. If everything is in flux, then who or what is the I that is doing all this clinging? What is this self that we work so hard to protect, promote, and please? To explore this, we must venture into the very heart of Buddhist wisdom, to an idea that challenges our most basic assumption about who we are. We must now turn our gaze to the truth of Anatta, the truth of no self. We have walked a path that has led us to a powerful and perhaps unsettling vista. We have looked honestly at the nature of our unease, the truth of dukkha. We have identified its engine, the relentless thirst of tanha, and we have seen why this thirst is ultimately futile, because it tries to grasp things in a universe defined by the law of constant change, the law of Anicca. Everything we experience, from the mountains and the stars to our own thoughts and feelings, is like a flowing river. But this leads us to the most fundamental question of all. As we stand on the bank of this river of change, watching it all flow by, who exactly is the one watching? If everything changes, what about the I that seems to be here, continuous and solid, day after day? What is this self that we protect so fiercely? The self that feels pride, shame, joy, and sorrow? The answer to this question is perhaps the most radical, the most challenging, and ultimately the most liberating teaching the Buddha ever offered. It is the truth of anatta, or no self. Let us be clear from the outset. This teaching is not a declaration that you do not exist. It is not a nihilistic statement that nothing matters. Instead, it is a profound invitation to investigate the way in which you exist. It suggests that our common sense idea of being a solid, separate, continuous self, a little person or CEO sitting inside our heads, is a powerful illusion. To see through this illusion is not to be annihilated, but to be set free. To begin this investigation, we can do what the Buddha himself suggested. We can search for this self. If this permanent, unchanging I exists, we should be able to find it somewhere within our experience. Let's look. The Buddha analyzed our entire experience into 5 categories, known as the 5 aggregates or skandhas. If a self exists, it must be found in one of these. First, there is form. This is your physical body, made of flesh, blood, and bone. Is your body yourself? It seems like a good candidate, but look closer. Your body is a textbook example of Anicca. It is changing from moment to moment. It grows, it ages, it gets sick, it heals. The cells that compose it are constantly dying and being replaced. The body you have today is not the body you had as a child, nor is it the body you will have in old age. It is a process, not a permanent thing. So, the self cannot be the body. Second, there are feelings. This includes all our sensations of pleasure, pain, and neutrality. Are your feelings yourself? This is even less likely. Feelings are incredibly fleeting. One moment you feel joy, the next moment sadness, then boredom, then irritation. They rise and fall like waves on the ocean. If you were your feelings, yourself would be born and would die hundreds of times a day. You would cease to exist entirely when you felt neutral. So, the self cannot be our feelings. Third, we have perceptions. This is the faculty of recognition and labeling. You see a shape and color and perceive tree. You hear a sound and perceive music. But are your perceptions yourself? Perceptions are also unreliable and transient. You might perceive a person as a threat one day and a friend the next. A piece of art might seem profound in one moment and meaningless in another. Our perceptions are conditioned and constantly shifting. So, the self cannot be our perceptions. Fourth, we come to mental formations. This is a broad category that includes all our thoughts, opinions, beliefs, moods, habits, and intentions. This is often where we most strongly locate our sense of self. I am my thoughts. But is this true? Thoughts appear in the mind unbidden and then vanish. Your beliefs and opinions have changed dramatically over the course of your life. The chattering voice in your head, the monkey mind, is a chaotic stream of activity, not a stable, singular entity. It is a process of thinking, not a solid thinker. So, the self cannot be our mental formations. Finally, there is consciousness. This is the raw faculty of awareness itself, the consciousness that sees, that hears, that knows. Perhaps this is the self, but the Buddha pointed out that consciousness is also dependent. It does not exist on its own. There is seeing consciousness only when there is a sight. There is hearing consciousness only when there is a sound. It arises in relationship to an object and then disappears when the object is gone. It is a flickering, dependent process, not a continuous, independent commander. So we have searched through all the components of our being, through our body, feelings, perceptions, thoughts, and consciousness, and we cannot find a single, permanent, independent entity we can call a self. This can be a confusing idea. So let us turn to a classic story that makes it perfectly clear. Over 2,000 years ago, a Greek king named Milinda, who ruled a kingdom in what is now India, was a great lover of philosophy and debate. He had heard of a brilliant Buddhist sage named Nagasena and wished to challenge him. The king arrived with his retinue and after the initial greetings, asked the sage his name. "Your Majesty," the sage replied, "I am known as Nagasena, but this is only a designation, a convenient name. There is no permanent person to be found here." King Milinda, clever and well-versed in logic, smiled. He saw an opening. "If there is no permanent person called Nagasena," the king challenged, "then who is it that wears these robes and eats this food? Who is it that meditates and studies? Who is it I am speaking to?" He then gestured to the chariot that Nagasena had arrived in. "Venerable sir, did you walk here or did you arrive in a chariot?" "I arrived in a chariot," said Nagasena. "Excellent," said the king. "Then please, show me the chariot. Is the pole the chariot?" "No, your majesty," Nagasena replied. "Are the wheels the chariot?" "No, your majesty." "Is the axle, the frame, the reins?" With each question, Nagasena calmly answered, "No, your majesty." The king, triumphant, declared, "Then, venerable sir, you have spoken a falsehood. You said you arrived in a chariot, yet when we look for it, there is no chariot to be found." Nagasena remained calm. He then turned the question back to the king. "Your majesty, you are a great king, raised in luxury. How did you arrive here today? Did you walk?" "No, sir," said the king. "I arrived in my own chariot." "You say you arrived in a chariot?" Nagasena said. "Is the ornate canopy your chariot? Are the jeweled wheels your chariot? Is the golden frame your chariot?" The king, like Nagasena, had to answer no to each question. Nagasena then smiled gently and said, "So where is the chariot?" "Your majesty, the word chariot is simply a name, a convenient label we use when the pole, the wheels, the axle, and the frame are all assembled and working together in a particular way. It has no separate, independent existence apart from its parts. It is a convention." He then looked at the king. In exactly the same way, Nagasena is a convenient name, a label for the temporary coming together of the body, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. When they are assembled in this way, we use the name Nagasena. But if you search for a permanent, unchanging master sitting inside, you will not find one. This is the liberating truth of Anatta. It doesn't mean you are nothing. It means you are not a thing at all. You are a process. You are a verb, not a noun. You are a river, not a statue. And this is the best news in the world. Why? Because if you are a fixed, solid statue, you cannot change. You are brittle. If someone insults the statue is damaged. If a piece breaks off, it is scarred forever. But if you are a river, you are fluid and adaptable. If someone throws a rock or an insult into a river, what happens? It makes a splash, a few ripples, and then the river flows on, completely unperturbed. If you are not a fixed self, you are not permanently defined by your past. The label of failure is just a story. It is not who you are. The label of success is also just a story. You do not need to be imprisoned by the pressure of maintaining it. When you feel anger, you can know that I am not angry. Anger is simply a temporary energy flowing through the process. This insight creates a space, a gap between the experience and a sense of a personal self that is being victimized by it. This space is freedom. It is the freedom to change, to grow, and to let go of the heavy, burdensome stories we tell about the imaginary statue called me. We have now journeyed through the foundational pillars of Buddhist thought. We have seen the suffering of dukkha, its cause in the thirst of tanha, the futility of this thirst because of anicca, and the ultimate illusion of the very self who is doing the thirsting, anatta. Understanding these truths intellectually is like reading a map. It is useful, it points the way, but it is not the journey itself. The map can show you the destination, but it cannot walk the path for you. So, how do we begin to experience this freedom, this spaciousness of no self, in our own lives? How do we ground this profound philosophy in our moment-to-moment reality? The Buddha provided a direct, practical method for this investigation. It is a way of seeing these truths for ourselves, not just believing them. It begins with the simple yet radical act of paying attention. It begins with the practice of mindfulness. We have now laid out a profound and challenging philosophical map. We have explored the diagnosis of our dis-ease, dukkha. We have identified its cause in the relentless thirst of tanha. We have understood why this thirst is futile in a universe of constant change, anicca. And we have even questioned the very existence of a solid, separate self who is doing the suffering, the truth of anatta. But a map, no matter how accurate, is not the territory itself. Reading a book about swimming will not keep you afloat in the water. To truly benefit from this wisdom, we must move from intellectual understanding to lived direct experience. We need a way to explore the territory of our own minds and see these truths for ourselves. The Buddha, being the ultimate practical psychologist, provided just such a tool. It is not something exotic or mystical. It is a fundamental human capacity that we all possess, though we rarely cultivate it. It is the practice of mindfulness. In Pali, the word is Sati. Mindfulness is best defined as paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. Let us unpack that simple phrase, for it contains a complete path within it. On purpose means that this is an intentional act. It is the opposite of our usual state of being, which is often mindless, distracted, and running on autopilot. We are consciously choosing to wake up from the dream of our thoughts. In the present moment is the arena of our practice, not the past, which is a memory, not the future, which is a fantasy, but right here, right now, in the only moment life ever actually happens. And most importantly, non-judgmentally. This is the quality of kindness and compassion we bring to our attention. We are not trying to fix, change, or criticize what we find. We are simply observing with a gentle, open curiosity, like a scientist impartially observing a natural phenomenon. To appreciate the power of mindfulness, we must first recognize its opposite, our default state of mind. Think about your day so far. Can you remember the sensation of the warm water on your skin in the shower? Or were you already planning your first meeting? Did you actually taste the first few bites of your breakfast? Or were you scrolling through your phone, your mind a million miles away? Have you ever driven a familiar route and arrived at your destination with absolutely no memory of the journey? This is mindlessness. This is autopilot. We are physically present, but our minds are lost in a thicket of thoughts, a phenomenon often called the monkey mind, swinging restlessly from one branch of thought to another. We are caught in loops of replaying past grievances or rehearsing future anxieties. And this default state is the fertile ground in which suffering grows. When we are lost in thought, we are not living our lives. We are living in a mental simulation of our lives, and we miss the real thing entirely. Mindfulness is the radical act of stepping out of the simulation and arriving in the reality of the present. So how do we begin? The most accessible and foundational method is the practice of mindfulness of breath. The breath is the perfect anchor for our attention. Why? Because unlike a thought, the breath is always happening in the present moment. You cannot breathe in the past or in the future. It is also always with us, from the moment of our birth to the moment of our death. And it is relatively neutral, a steady, rhythmic process that can be a place of refuge. The practice itself is profoundly simple. You can begin right now. Find a posture that is comfortable for you. You can be sitting on a chair with your feet flat on the floor or on a cushion on the ground. The key is to have a straight but not rigid spine. Let your body be dignified and relaxed. You can gently close your eyes, or if you prefer, lower your gaze a few feet in front of you. Now, simply bring your attention to the physical sensation of your breathing. Don't try to change it or control it. Just notice it. Where do you feel the breath most vividly? Perhaps it's the cool air entering your nostrils. Perhaps it's the gentle rise and fall of your chest. Or maybe it's the expansion and contraction of your abdomen. Choose one of these spots and just rest your attention there, as if you were resting a feather on the surface of the breath. Feel the full duration of one in-breath. Feel the full duration of one out-breath. And now, for the most important instruction of all, inevitably, your mind will wander. A thought will arise. A sound will distract you. A memory will pull you away. The moment you notice that your mind has wandered is not a failure. In fact, that moment of noticing is the victory. That is the moment of mindfulness. You have woken up. And what do you do when you wake up? Without any judgment, without any scolding, you gently acknowledge where your mind went, thinking, and then you kindly, gently escort your attention back to the anchor of the breath. That is the entire practice. The wandering, the noticing, and the gentle returning over and over again. Each time you guide your mind back, you are strengthening your capacity for focus and presence. Each return is a single repetition, a bicep curl for the muscle of your attention. It is vital to release the myth that meditation is about stopping your thoughts or achieving a state of a perfectly blank mind. This is the single greatest obstacle for beginners. They sit down, notice the chaos of their thoughts, and conclude, I can't do this, my mind is too busy. The mind's job is to produce thoughts, just as the stomach's job is to digest food. You cannot command it to stop. The goal of mindfulness is not to stop the thoughts, but to change your relationship to them. Imagine you are sitting on a grassy hill, looking up at the sky. Your thoughts are like clouds. Sometimes they are white and fluffy, sometimes they are dark and stormy. They drift in, they linger for a while, and they drift away. You are not the clouds. You are the vast, open, stable sky in which the clouds appear. Mindfulness is the practice of remembering that you are the sky. You can simply watch the clouds of thought, emotion, and sensation pass by without being swept away by them. This perspective shift is the beginning of profound freedom. This practice is not limited to formal sitting on a cushion. Its true power is realized when we weave it into the fabric of our daily lives. There is a story of a busy farmer who came to the Buddha and said, "Master, your teachings are wonderful, but I cannot practice them. I don't have time to go to a monastery or sit in a cave. I have fields to plow, animals to tend to, and a family to feed. My life is one of constant work." The Buddha did not tell the farmer to abandon his duties. Instead, he taught him to integrate the practice into his life as it was. When you are walking to your fields, the Buddha said, be aware that you are walking. Feel the sensation of your feet touching the earth. When you are plowing, know that you are plowing. Be present with the movement of your body, the sound of the plow in the soil. When you are tending to your animals, give them your full attention. Your work is not an obstacle to your practice. Your work is your practice. We can do the same. You can practice mindful eating. For the first 3 bites of your next meal, put down your phone and your fork between bites. Simply notice the colors and smells of the food. When you chew, notice the textures and the explosion of tastes. You will discover that you have not truly tasted your food in years. You can practice mindful walking. As you walk from your car to your front door, feel the sensation of your feet making contact with the ground. Notice the movement in your legs and the feeling of the air on your skin. You can practice mindful listening. The next time you are in a conversation, set the intention to truly listen to the other person, to receive their words fully, without simultaneously planning your own response. Any activity, no matter how mundane washing the dishes, brushing your teeth, waiting in line can, become an opportunity to step out of the frantic stream of thought and arrive in the calm reality of the present moment. Mindfulness, then, is the foundational skill. It is the flashlight we use to illuminate the dark, unexplored corners of our own inner world. It allows us to see the constant change of Anicca in the flow of our breath and thoughts. It helps us see the lack of a solid self, Anatta, as we realize we are the sky, not the clouds. Through this honest, non-judgmental attention, we become intimately aware of the full spectrum of our human experience. We see not only the fleeting thoughts, but also the powerful currents of our emotions. But what happens when the flashlight illuminates something we don't want to see? What do we do when the clouds we observe are not white and fluffy, but dark and stormy? What is our practice when we feel the sharp sting of jealousy, the heavy weight of sadness, or the hot fire of anger? This is where mindfulness partners with another essential quality, another facet of the open hand. It partners with the quality of courageous and compassionate acceptance. With the practice of mindfulness, we have switched on the light in the inner chamber of our being. We have committed to looking at our experience with an honest, purposeful attention. And when we do this, we discover not just the quiet rhythm of our breath or the random drift of our thoughts, but also the powerful, sometimes turbulent, currents of our emotional life. The flashlight of our awareness illuminates everything. We see joy and contentment, but we also inevitably find anxiety, boredom, grief, anger, and fear. For many of us, this is where the practice becomes difficult. Our entire life has been a training in how to deal with these uncomfortable feelings, and that training has generally taught us 2 strategies, both of which lead to suffering. The first strategy is repression. When a painful emotion like sadness or fear arises, we push it down. We ignore it, distract ourselves, numb it with food or entertainment or work. We hold it underwater like a beach ball, pretending it isn't there. But this takes an enormous amount of energy, and eventually our grip weakens and the feeling erupts, often with far more force than it originally had. The second strategy is expression or amplification. We are overcome by the emotion. We become the anger. We become the sadness. We get completely lost in its story, believing every word it tells us, and we act it out, often causing harm to ourselves or others. We are not just feeling the wave, we are the tidal wave, crashing destructively onto the shore. There must be a third way, a middle path between the clenched fist of repression and the chaotic storm of unrestrained expression. This third way is the gentle, open hand of acceptance. To accept a difficult emotion does not mean that you like it. It does not mean you condone it or want it to stay forever. It is not passive resignation. It is a courageous and wise act of acknowledging reality. It is simply dropping the fight with what is already here. Imagine you are standing in the ocean. A large wave begins to form and roll towards you. This wave is an emotion, perhaps a wave of grief or a wave of anxiety. You cannot command the ocean to be flat. You have two choices. You can turn your back, brace yourself, and try to resist the wave. In this case, it will crash upon you with immense force, knocking you down, leaving you gasping and disoriented. Or you can turn to face the wave, relax your body, and dive into it, allowing its energy to pass over and through you. You learn to work with the energy of the wave instead of fighting against it. This is acceptance. It is looking directly at the anxiety, the sadness, the anger, and saying, I see you are here. For this moment, I will stop fighting your presence. We let go of the secondary struggle, the war against the feeling itself, which is often more painful than the original feeling. There is a profound story that illustrates this principle with beautiful simplicity. It is said that even after his enlightenment, the Buddha would be visited by Mara. Mara is a symbolic figure in Buddhism, representing all the forces that obstruct our peace out: fear, greed, anger, all our inner demons. One evening, as the Buddha was sitting in meditation, his attendant Anatta noticed him looking towards the entrance of their dwelling. Anatta saw nothing, but he could feel a palpable darkness, a heavy and malevolent energy gathering there. He was terrified. The Buddha, however, remained perfectly calm. He simply looked towards the darkness and said with a quiet, steady voice, I see you, Mara. This is the first step, mindful recognition. He didn't pretend the darkness wasn't there. He didn't panic. He simply named what he saw. Then the Buddha did something astonishing. He said, Welcome, there is tea ready. Would you like to come in and sit with me? He offered hospitality to his own demon. He met the darkness not with a sword, but with a teacup. And in the face of this radical, non-adversarial acceptance, this open-hearted welcome, Mara's power dissolved. He had no fight to engage in, no resistance to push against, and so the darkness simply faded away. The lesson is clear. What we resist persists and grows stronger. What we meet with calm, mindful awareness loses its power over us. This might sound like a beautiful idea, but how do we actually practice it when we are in the grip of a powerful emotion? The contemporary mindfulness teacher, Tara Brach, has popularized a beautiful and practical method for this, a structured way to offer ourselves that same hospitality. It is a practice called RAIN, which is an acronym for Recognize, Allow, Investigate, and Nurture. Let's say a wave of intense anxiety washes over you. The first step, R, is to recognize. You mentally whisper, anxiety, or this is anxiety. Simply naming the feeling creates a sliver of space. You are no longer 100% possessed by it. You are the one who is aware of anxiety. This is the I see you, Mara moment. The second step, A, is to allow. This is the heart of acceptance. You give the feeling permission to be there, just for a little while. You can say to yourself, it's okay. Let this be here. You intentionally relax the physical and mental resistance. You stop holding the beach ball underwater. You feel the tension in your stomach, the tightness in your shoulders, and you consciously try to soften around it, creating space for the feeling to exist without needing it to go away. This is a radical act of inner peacemaking. The third step, I, is to investigate. This is not a cold, analytical investigation, but a gentle, kind curiosity. You turn towards the feeling and ask, what does this actually feel like in my body? You are not interested in the story about why you are anxious. You are interested in the raw, physical sensations. Is it a buzzing feeling in your chest? A cold knot in your stomach? A sense of vibrating energy in your hands? You just notice the physical landscape of the emotion. Then you might gently ask, what does this anxious part of me believe? Perhaps it believes, I'm going to fail, or I'm not safe. You just listen to the belief without judging it or necessarily believing it. You are simply getting to know the texture of the experience. The final step, N, is to nurture. This is where you actively bring compassion to the wounded part of yourself. You ask, what does this vulnerable part of me most need to hear right now? And you offer that message to yourself. You might place a hand over your heart, a gesture of physical comfort, and whisper inwardly, "It's okay, sweetheart. This is a difficult moment, but I am here with you. We will get through this." You are essentially becoming your own compassionate friend. You are offering the cup of tea to your own Mara. You are treating your own pain with kindness instead of with judgment or fear. This practice of rain is not a one-time fix. It is a way of reparenting ourselves, of transforming our relationship with our own inner life from one of conflict to one of care. And in this practice lies a beautiful paradox. So often we fight our feelings because we desperately want them to go away. Yet the moment we stop fighting, the moment we truly and deeply accept a feeling and allow it to be there, is the very moment it begins to lose its grip on us. The energy of resistance is the fuel that keeps the fire of emotion burning. When we withdraw that fuel, when we meet the fire with the cooling waters of acceptance and compassion, it naturally begins to burn out on its own. The wave, once allowed to be a wave, naturally crests, breaks, and dissolves back into the ocean. This practice of meeting our pain with gentle acceptance is a profound form of self-compassion. It is the art of staying present and kind in the midst of the storm. But what if we could go further? What if, instead of just dealing with the storms when they arrive, we could actively change the climate of our minds? What if we could water the seeds of warmth and friendliness within us, making the inner landscape more gentle and welcoming for whatever arises? This leads us from the responsive act of acceptance to the proactive cultivation of a warm and open heart. It leads us to the radiant practice of metta, or loving kindness. We have learned to sit with the storms of our inner world. With the tool of mindfulness, we can recognize the dark clouds of anger or fear, and with the courageous practice of acceptance, like rain, we can allow these storms to pass through us without being destroyed. This is a profound skill of emotional resilience. But what if we could do more than simply weather the storms? What if we could actively change the inner climate itself? What if we could learn to cultivate more sunshine, more warmth, more gentle light within the landscape of the mind, so that when the storms do arrive, they are met with a more resilient and welcoming environment? This moves us from a reactive stance to a proactive one. It is the practice of deliberately planting, watering, and nurturing the seeds of kindness in our own hearts. This is the beautiful, transformative practice of metta, a Pali word most often translated as loving kindness. Metta is the sincere, unconditional wish for the well-being of ourselves and others. It is a boundless, open-hearted friendliness, a goodwill that is not dependent on whether we like someone or whether they behave in the way we want. Before we explore how to practice it, it is helpful to understand what metta is not. It is not the possessive, romantic love we see in movies. It is not the conditional affection we might show someone in exchange for their approval. It is not about being superficially nice or letting others walk all over you. In fact, true metta is a quality of immense strength, and importantly, it is not a feeling that we are trying to force. It is an intention that we practice. The feeling of warmth or love may or may not arise during the practice, and that is perfectly fine. The practice itself lies in the sincere repetition of the intention, the gentle wishing of well-being. The feelings are a possible result, not a required prerequisite. The formal practice of metta meditation is a systematic way of expanding the heart's capacity for kindness. It unfolds in stages, like the slow opening of a flower. We begin in a comfortable, quiet posture, just as we would for mindfulness of breath. But instead of anchoring our attention on the breath, we use specific phrases as our anchor, repeating them silently in the mind. The first stage, and often the most difficult for people in the modern world, is to direct these wishes of loving kindness toward ourselves. We are so often our own harshest critics, our minds filled with a constant stream of self-judgment. We cannot offer water to others from an empty well. So we must begin by offering this kindness to ourselves. You bring your own image to mind, perhaps placing a hand gently over your heart, and you silently repeat a series of phrases. The traditional phrases are, may I be safe, may I be healthy, may I be happy, may I live with ease. You can use these or any phrases that resonate with you. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be peaceful. You just repeat them gently, sincerely. If the inner critic arises with thoughts like, you don't deserve this, you simply notice that thought, let it go, and return to the gentle repetition of the phrases. You are planting new seeds in the garden of your mind. Once you have spent some time offering metta to yourself, the second stage is to bring to mind a benefactor or a dear friend. This is someone for whom it is very easy to feel gratitude and warmth: a mentor, a cherished family member, a close friend, even a beloved pet. You hold their image in your mind and you offer them the same wishes. May you be safe, may you be healthy, may you be happy, may you live with ease. Notice how this feels. Often, it is easier to wish well for others than for ourselves. Let any feelings of warmth or kindness that arise spread through your body. In the third stage, we expand the circle of kindness further to include a neutral person. This is someone you see in your daily life, but for whom you have no strong feelings, positive or negative. It could be the cashier at the grocery store, the mail carrier, a person you see on your commute. By including this person, we begin to break down the walls of indifference that we so often erect around ourselves. This person, just like you, wants to be happy and free from suffering. So, you hold their image in your mind and you offer them the same sincere wishes. May you be safe. May you be healthy. May you be happy. May you live with ease. This practice challenges our habit of seeing other people merely as background characters in the movie of our own life. The fourth stage is the most challenging, and it should be approached with care. Here, we practice sending loving kindness to a difficult person. This is someone with whom you have conflict or who has hurt you. It is essential to understand that this is not about condoning their harmful behavior. It is not about forcing forgiveness or pretending what they did was okay. This stage is a practice for your freedom. Holding on to anger and resentment is like holding a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. So, as an act of self-love and liberation, you bring this person's image to mind, and as best you can, you offer them the phrases, may you be safe, may you be happy. If this is too difficult, you can modify it. I wish you freedom from your own suffering, recognizing that their harmful actions likely come from their own deep pain. This practice is the powerful alchemy that begins to dissolve the hard knot of hatred in our own heart. Finally, in the fifth stage, we let the circle become boundless. We extend the wishes of metta outward in all directions. First, to everyone in the building you are in, then your city, then your country. Then you extend it to all beings on the planet, all people, regardless of their background, and all animals, from the largest whale to the smallest insect. You extend it to all beings in all realms, seen and unseen, near and far. May all beings be safe. May all beings be healthy. May all beings be happy. May all beings live with ease. You allow your heart to become a radiant sun, sending out rays of unconditional goodwill in every direction, without exception. The Buddha himself was the ultimate embodiment of this unwavering, unconditional loving kindness. His own cousin, a monk named Devadatta, was consumed by jealousy and ambition. On several occasions, Devadatta tried to kill the Buddha and take his place. He tried to create a schism, splitting the community of monks. He rolled a giant boulder down a hill, which only narrowly missed the Buddha. He even sent a ferocious, drunken elephant, Nalagiri, to charge and trample the Buddha in the street. In each instance, as the elephant charged, bellowing and destroying everything in its path, the Buddha did not run. He did not fight. He stood his ground and radiated a powerful field of pure, unconditional loving kindness toward the enraged animal. The elephant, upon entering this field of metta, slowed down, became calm, and knelt peacefully at the Buddha's feet. This story illustrates a profound truth. The Buddha's compassion was not dependent on the actions of others. He saw Devadatta not as an evil enemy, but as a being deeply afflicted by the poisons of his own mind, and a suffering person creating more suffering. The Buddha knew that to meet hatred with hatred would only escalate the violence. To meet hatred with metta was the only path to true peace, for himself and for the world. This practice is the great antidote. It is the medicine for the poisons of the heart. Anger, resentment, and ill will cannot survive for long in a mind that is actively cultivating goodwill. It is like trying to light a match in the rain. Metta is the cooling rain that extinguishes the fires of hatred. Fear and anxiety are often rooted in a feeling of isolation and threat. Metta, by fostering a sense of warmth, safety, and connection to all life, directly soothes the anxious heart. Jealousy, the pain we feel at another's success, is healed by its beautiful counterpart, mudita, or appreciative joy, which is a natural outgrowth of metta. When we genuinely wish for others to be happy, we can actually feel joy when they are. Metta systematically replaces our contracted, fearful states of mind with expansive, open-hearted ones. It is a radical act of training the heart. It softens the hard, judgmental soil of our mind, making us more flexible, more forgiving, and more resilient. It is like carefully oiling a rusty, stuck hinge before we try to open a heavy door. The door is the letting go of our deepest attachments, and metta is the preparation that makes that seemingly impossible task possible. With a heart that has been softened and fortified by the practice of loving kindness, a heart that has practiced wishing well to ourselves and even to those who have caused us pain, we are now better equipped to approach the tangled, stubborn knots of our own personal history. We can now turn our gentle, mindful attention to one of the heaviest categories of stones in our backpack, the heavy, sharp-edged burden of the past. Having softened the heart with the warm, unconditional friendliness of metta, we find ourselves better equipped to handle the difficult work of letting go. Our inner landscape is more gentle, our spirit more resilient. We are now ready to turn our mindful, compassionate attention to one of the heaviest and most jagged stones in our invisible backpack. It is a stone we pick up and examine every single day, a weight that shapes our present and darkens our future. It is the burden of the past. For so many of us, the present moment is little more than a haunted house, its rooms and corridors endlessly echoing with the ghosts of yesterday. The ghost of a past mistake whispers words of shame in our ear. The ghost of a painful breakup replays scenes of heartbreak. The ghost of an old insult delivers its sting as if it were brand new. We are held captive by these specters, living not in the reality of today, but in a mental prison constructed from the memories of what has already been. To begin the process of liberation, we must first ask a very simple but profound question: where is the past? You cannot point to it. You cannot travel to it. It has no physical location, no substance. The past does not exist anywhere in the universe except for one place, as a pattern of thought and feeling occurring in your mind right now. The painful event that happened 10 years ago is not happening now. What is happening now is the memory of it. The pain you feel is not the old pain. It is the fresh pain of remembering, of reliving the story in the present moment. This is a revolutionary insight. It moves the problem from an unchangeable, sealed off then, to a workable, accessible now. We cannot change what happened, but we have the absolute power to change our relationship to the memory of what happened. The ghost is not made of chains and iron, it is made of thought, and we can learn to stop feeding it with our attention. The primary tool for this is the skill we have already been cultivating: mindfulness. Our mind has a deeply ingrained habit of time travel. When we are not consciously directing it, its default setting is often to ruminate on the past. Through mindfulness, we begin to notice this habit. As you go about your day, or during a formal meditation, you will notice the mind gravitating towards a familiar, painful memory. The practice is not to violently push the memory away, for that is just another form of struggle. The practice is to simply recognize it with a gentle, non-judgmental awareness. You can say to yourself, the mind is visiting the past again. This is a memory. This is thinking. You label it softly. Then, with great kindness, as if you were guiding a lost child by the hand, you gently escort your attention back to a present moment anchor. You return to the feeling of your breath, the sensation of your feet on the floor, or the sound of the world around you. This is not an act of repression. Repression is a fearful refusal to look. This is a conscious, empowered choice about where you place your energy. You are acknowledging the thought, the ghost, but you are choosing not to serve it tea. You are choosing not to invite it in and let it take over your house. Each time you notice the mind has strayed into the past and you gently guide it back, you are weakening the old, compulsive neural pathway of rumination and strengthening the new, intentional pathway of presence. You are retraining your mind to live in the present where life is actually happening. Over time, the ghosts may still appear at the door, but you will find they have less and less power to pull you out of the present moment. To understand the radical power, we have to transform our relationship to the past. There is no story more extreme or more hopeful than that of a man named Angulimala. Before he met the Buddha, Angulimala was a terrifying serial killer, a bandit who terrorized the kingdom of Kosala. His name meant finger garland because he had taken a vow to kill 1,000 people, and he wore a gruesome necklace made from the fingers of his victims. He was the embodiment of a person defined by a horrific past. One day, the Buddha, despite the terrified warnings of the local villagers, began walking calmly down the road toward Angulimala's forest. Angulimala saw the lone monk and was delighted. Here was his final victim. He drew his sword and began to run. But a strange thing happened. Though the Buddha was only walking at a normal pace, Angulimala, running with all his might, could not catch up to him. Exhausted and bewildered, he screamed out, "Stop, monk, stop!" The Buddha, without turning, replied in a clear, calm voice, "I have stopped, Angulimala. It is you who have not stopped." This enigmatic statement shattered Angulimala's reality. He asked the Buddha what he meant. The Buddha explained, "I have stopped, for I have laid down all violence against living beings. You have not stopped. You are still trapped in the cycle of violence and hatred." In that moment, Angulimala saw the monstrousness of his life and the profound peace of the man before him. He was overcome with remorse, threw down his weapons, and begged to become the Buddha's disciple. He was ordained as a monk, and through incredible dedication and meditative practice, he completely purified his mind, eventually becoming a fully enlightened saint, an arahant. His transformation was absolute. However, his past did not simply vanish. When he would walk into the villages for alms, people would recognize him. Terrified, they would shout insults and throw rocks and sticks at him, injuring him badly. He would return to the Buddha, bleeding and bruised. The Buddha would simply say to him, "Bear it, my friend, bear it. You are experiencing in this life the results of actions that could have caused you to suffer in hell for countless eons." Angulimala bore it all with patience and forgiveness, understanding it as the inevitable unfolding of his past karma. The story of Angulimala is the ultimate testament to the truth that our past does not have to be our prison. If a man with such a horrific history can achieve the highest state of spiritual purity, then surely we can find it in our hearts to let go of our own, much smaller, regrets and mistakes. His story teaches us that our identity is not fixed by what we have done. Our potential for goodness and peace in the present moment is always available, regardless of the past. This leads us to the second essential tool for healing yesterday, the practice of forgiveness. Forgiveness is one of the most misunderstood concepts. We often think it means condoning a harmful act, or that it requires us to reconcile with someone who hurt us. This is not the Buddhist understanding. Forgiveness is primarily an act of self-healing. Holding on to anger, resentment, and a desire for revenge is like grasping a burning coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. No matter what, you are the one who gets burned. Forgiveness is the wise and compassionate act of putting down the hot coal. It is for your benefit. It is you releasing yourself from the burden of carrying the other person's poison in your own heart. It is a declaration of inner freedom, a statement that you will no longer allow the past event to cause you suffering in the present. You can do this as a meditation, bringing the person to mind and saying silently, I forgive you. I release you from the debt of my anger. I wish you peace. You may not feel it at first, but the intention begins the process of unclenching your own heart. Even more challenging for many of us is the act of forgiving ourselves. We can be our own most relentless accusers, replaying our mistakes and berating ourselves for not having been wiser, stronger, or better. To heal this, we must turn the warm light of Metta upon ourselves. Bring to mind that younger version of you who made the mistake you regret so deeply. See that person not as a villain, but as someone who was doing the best they could with the understanding, wisdom, and pain they had at that time. They acted from a place of ignorance or hurt. Offer that younger self your compassion. Say to them, I forgive you. You did not know then what I know now. I release you from my judgment. By forgiving ourselves, we stop demanding that the past be different, and we embrace the freedom to be different in the present. The past is a story. That is all it is. We cannot go back and rewrite the chapters that have already been written, but we can choose to stop rereading the painful parts over and over again. We can choose to put the book down. By using mindfulness to anchor ourselves in the present and forgiveness to release the emotional charge of past events, we can learn to unchain ourselves from the ghosts of yesterday. We can finally walk out of the haunted house and into the fresh, clean air of the present moment. By learning to unchain ourselves from the ghosts of yesterday, we discover a profound peace. But the mind, our tireless time-traveling machine, has another favorite destination. If the past is a prison of regret, the future is a shimmering mirage that creates a prison of anxiety. We must now learn to release our grip, not only on what has been, but also on what we desperately demand must be. We have begun the courageous work of making peace with our own past. By learning to see our memories as present moment thoughts, and by applying the healing salve of forgiveness, we have started to loosen the chains that bind us to yesterday. We have started to put down that heavy book, but our restless, time-traveling mind has another favorite destination, another escape hatch from the reality of the present. If the past is a prison of regret, the future is a shimmering, seductive prison of anxiety. We free ourselves from one form of suffering only to find ourselves entangled in another. We stop replaying what has been and instead begin obsessively pre-playing what might be. This constant forward projection, this habit of living in a future that does not yet exist, is the very definition of anxiety. Anxiety is a misuse of one of our most powerful human faculties, imagination. Our ability to think ahead, to plan and anticipate, is a tool that has allowed us to build civilizations. But when that tool is hijacked by fear, it turns against us. It becomes a tireless horror movie director, scripting catastrophic scenarios in the cinema of our minds. We sit in the dark, watching these self-produced films, and we mistake them for reality. We watch the movie titled, I'm Going to Fail the Big Presentation, and our heart begins to race. We watch the feature film called, What If I Get Sick, and our stomach ties itself in knots. We watch the sequel, They're All Going to Leave Me, and a feeling of desperate loneliness washes over us. The crucial thing to see is that all of this suffering, the racing heart, the tight chest, the feeling of dread is happening now in the present moment. It is being fueled by thoughts about a then that has not happened, and very likely never will happen in the way we imagine. Just as we investigated the nature of the past, let us ask the same question of the future. Where is it? Can you show it to me? It too has no reality. It is a pure mental construct, a projection. When we are anxious, we are not suffering from the future. We are suffering from our present moment thinking about the future. This insight is the key that can unlock the prison door of anxiety. We cannot control the future. We cannot know with certainty what will happen tomorrow. But we can, with practice, learn to work with the thoughts arising in our minds right now. We can learn to stop being a terrified audience member and become a calm observer of the mind's movie-making process. At this point, a practical question arises. Does letting go of the future mean we should stop planning? Should we not save for retirement, make a doctor's appointment, or set goals for our career? Not at all. The Buddhist path is deeply pragmatic. Skillful planning is a wise and necessary part of life. A wise farmer prepares the soil and plants seeds in the spring with the intention of a harvest in the fall. This is a skillful use of foresight. The problem is not in the planning. The problem is in our attachment to the plan. This is the crucial distinction between skillful intention and unskillful clinging. Skillful intention is like a sailor, setting their sails to best catch the wind. The sailor knows they can control the sails, but they cannot control the wind. The unskillful sailor, the one who clings, creates a rigid and detailed plan of exactly how the wind must blow. When the wind inevitably changes, as it always does, this sailor becomes enraged and frustrated, fighting against reality. The skillful sailor, however, simply notices the shift in the wind and wisely adjusts their sails. Letting go of the future doesn't mean we stop setting the sails. It means we stop getting angry at the wind. We hold our plans lightly, as preferences, not as rigid demands on the universe. There is a simple story that perfectly illustrates the futility of anxiety. A farmer's fields were dry, and his crops were beginning to wither under the heat of the sun. He looked up at the sky and saw some clouds gathering. He desperately needed it to rain that night, or his harvest would be lost. As evening fell, he began to worry. He paced back and forth in his small hut. What if it doesn't rain, he thought. His mind immediately produced a movie of his crops turning to dust. My family will have nothing to eat. We will starve. His heart began to pound. He looked out the window again. The clouds were still there, but no rain. What if the wind blows the clouds away? His mind tormented him. He imagined his neighbors laughing at his misfortune. He spent the entire night in this state of agitated misery, a prisoner of his own catastrophic thoughts, and he did not sleep for a single moment. The sun began to rise, and with it a gentle, soaking rain began to fall. His crops would be saved. But the farmer was completely exhausted, pale, and weak. He had suffered terribly all night long, and his suffering had accomplished nothing. His neighbor, who had the same fields and the same need for rain, had slept soundly, trusting that what would be, would be. The farmer's anxiety had zero effect on the weather. It could not make a single drop of rain fall. The only thing his worry changed was the quality of his own present moment, poisoning his peace and stealing his strength. Our anxiety is just like this. It is a terrible price to pay for a future that is not guaranteed and a control that is not real. So, what is the practice? If clinging to certainty creates anxiety, the path to peace is learning to embrace uncertainty. Our modern world teaches us that "I don't know" is a statement of weakness. We are supposed to have a 5-year plan, a 10-year vision. We are supposed to be certain. Buddhist wisdom suggests the opposite. The deepest wisdom lies in becoming comfortable with not knowing. It is about trusting that we have the inner resources to meet life as it unfolds, moment by moment. Imagine you are walking down a dark country road at night, holding a small lantern. The lantern does not illuminate the entire path all the way to your destination. It only casts a pool of light a few feet in front of you. And yet, with just those few feet of light, you can walk the entire journey safely. Our life is like this. We don't need to see the final destination. We only need enough light for the step we are taking right now. The practice, then, is to keep bringing our attention back to the small pool of light that is the present moment. When you feel the familiar grip of anxiety about the futura, worry about your health, your finances, your relationships, the first step is to mindfully recognize it. This is anxiety. This is future thinking. Then, gently guide your attention out of the imaginary future and into the reality of your body, right now. Feel your feet planted firmly on the ground. Feel the solidness of the chair supporting you. Feel the air of a single breath entering and leaving your body. This is real. This is happening now. The catastrophic story in your mind is not. You can offer yourself a simple, reassuring phrase, "It is okay not to know. Whatever happens, I only have to handle it one moment at a time, and I can handle this moment." We trade the exhausting, impossible job of being a fortune teller for the simple, liberating peace of just being present. We release ourselves from the prison of anxiety not by gaining perfect knowledge or control over the future, but by relinquishing the desperate need for that control. We learn to set our sails with wisdom, but we hold the tiller with a light touch, ready to adapt to the unpredictable winds of life. We put down the heavy burden of trying to manage the entire universe. As we release our tight grip on the stories of yesterday and the fantasies of tomorrow, our attention naturally finds its home more and more in the peace of the present moment. And what do we discover here in this space between past and future? We find the very self who was so deeply invested in those stories, the identity we worked so hard to protect and maintain. We must now turn the light of our awareness to the most intimate and subtle form of clinging of all, the clinging to our own rigid identity. We have embarked on a profound journey of letting go. We have begun to loosen our grip on the heavy, ghostly chains of the past and to release the frantic, anxious grasp we have on the future. As our attention learns to rest more comfortably in the calm space of the present moment, a new and more subtle object of our clinging comes into view. It is the very I who was so invested in those stories of yesterday and tomorrow. It is the protagonist of our personal drama, the hero or victim we believe ourselves to be. We must now turn the gentle light of our awareness onto the most intimate and perhaps most powerful form of attachment there is, the clinging to our own fixed identity. From a young age, we begin the process of building a self. It is a necessary part of our development, a way to make sense of the world and our place in it. We are like sculptors, and the raw material is our own life experience. We take a piece of praise from a parent, a painful comment from a classmate, a moment of triumph on the sports field, a stinging romantic rejection, a significant career achievement. We carefully select these moments and weave them together into a story, a narrative that begins with the words, I am smart, I am awkward, I am a leader, I am unlovable, I am a survivor, I am a creative person. We construct this story, this character, and then we put on the costume, we wear the mask. And after a while, in a strange and tragic act of forgetfulness, we forget that we are the actor. We come to believe that we are the costume. The problem is that this story, once it solidifies, becomes a filter through which we experience the entire world. It is no longer just a description of past events. It becomes a prescription for future experience. If the core of my story is, I am not good enough, I will interpret a neutral comment from my boss as criticism. I will see a friend's success as further proof of my own inadequacy. My identity becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. We stop seeing reality as it is, and instead, we only see the evidence that confirms the story of who we think we are. This is not freedom. This is a prison we have built for ourselves, bar by bar, story by story. Living inside this prison of a fixed identity causes immense suffering. It creates a deep and painful rigidity in our lives. If my identity is I am a strong, capable person, I might find it impossible to admit when I am struggling and need help, leading to burnout and isolation. If my identity is I am a kind and patient person, I may repress any natural feelings of anger or frustration, allowing them to fester and turn into resentment. We become terrified of any person, situation, or piece of information that threatens our carefully constructed mask. The man who identifies as a success lives in constant, low-grade fear of failure. The woman who identifies as an intellectual is terrified of looking foolish or saying, I don't know. Our identity, which was meant to give us a sense of safety, becomes a source of deep insecurity, something we must constantly protect and defend. We lose our spontaneity, our ability to respond freshly to the present moment. Instead, we react mechanically from the predictable script of the character we believe ourselves to be. There is a classic Zen story that perfectly illustrates this self-imposed prison. A famous university professor, a man renowned for his deep intellectual understanding of philosophy and religion, traveled a long way to visit a reclusive Zen master to learn about Zen. Upon being welcomed into the master's simple hut, The professor immediately began to speak. He spoke of all the sacred texts he had read, the complex doctrines he had mastered, the similarities he had noted between different contemplative traditions. He was, in essence, presenting his credentials, showcasing his identity as a learned man. The Zen master listened patiently and politely, and then began to prepare tea. He placed a cup in front of the professor and began to pour. As the professor continued to talk, the master continued to pour. He poured until the cup was full, and then he kept pouring. Hot tea overflowed the rim, spilling into the saucer and then onto the table. The professor, finally stopping his monologue, cried out in alarm, "Stop, it is full. No more will go in." The Zen master put down the teapot, looked calmly into the professor's eyes, and said, "Like this cup, you are full of your own opinions and speculations. How can I show you Zen unless you first empty your cup? We are all that, professor. Our cup is our fixed identity, our story of self. We are so full of what we think we know about ourselves and the world that there is no room for anything new to enter. There is no room for true learning, for genuine growth, for the direct, unmediated experience of life. To empty our cup is the practice of letting go of our rigid identity. It is the courageous act of admitting that our story is not the truth. It is just a story. It is here that the profound wisdom of Anatta, or no, self, moves from a philosophical concept to a lived practice. We remember that these identities, the scholar, the victim, the successor, simply mental formations, temporary constructs. They are not solid, and they are not who we truly are. We are the sky, not the fleeting cloud of a particular identity. So how do we practice this? How do we begin to empty our cup? We can start by intentionally cultivating a beginner's mind, a mind of not knowing. When you enter a conversation, especially one on a topic you feel knowledgeable about, you can consciously let go of the identity of the expert. Instead, you can enter with a genuine intention to listen and learn something new, even from someone you might initially dismiss. When you face a new task or a challenge, you can notice the mind's tendency to immediately label your ability, "I am good at this," or "I am terrible at this." These are fixed identities. Instead, you can practice approaching the task with simple curiosity. This is a new experience. Let's just see what happens. This is not about becoming stupid or ignorant. It is about trading the brittle arrogance of certainty for the supple, spacious wisdom of humility. It is about giving yourself permission to be a work in progress. When you make a mistake, notice the tendency to reinforce a negative identity. See, I am a failure. The practice is to gently uncouple the action from the identity. An action can fail, but you are not a failure. You are the vast, open awareness in which an action and its result have occurred. This creates a space for learning rather than a prison of shame. You can begin to see your life not as a performance that is being graded, but as a laboratory where you are free to experiment. You can try on new ways of being. You can surprise yourself. You can change. When we are no longer clinging to a single, rigid mask, we are free to wear any mask lightly or to go without one altogether. The ultimate freedom, then, is the freedom from having to be somebody. It is the release of the exhausting, lifelong project of building, promoting, and defending a particular version of me. You are not the story you tell about yourself. You are not your job title, your accomplishments, or your failures. You are not the mask. True authenticity is not found in perfecting a mask, but in having the courage to take it off. By letting go of who we think we are, we open ourselves up to the boundless potential of who we can become in each new moment. This is the freedom of the empty cup, always ready to receive the fresh, ever-changing nectar of life. As we loosen our grip on these grand self-definitions like the success or the victim, we can start to notice how this clinging to identity plays out in smaller, everyday moments. One of the most powerful and stubborn components of our constructed self is the part that believes simply, "I am right." This attachment to our own views is a constant source of subtle conflict and disconnection. We must now examine the suffering that comes from this deep need to be right and the freedom that comes from letting it go. We have begun the courageous work of dismantling the rigid story of ourselves, of seeing the masks we wear not as our true face, but as temporary costumes. As we loosen our grip on these grand identities, the success, the failure, the artist, the victim, we can start to notice how this deep habit of clinging to a self plays out in the small, seemingly insignificant moments of our daily lives. There is perhaps no arena where the ego is more active, more defensive, and more vulnerable than in the realm of our own opinions. We must now turn our attention to one of the most stubborn and subtle forms of attachment, the deep, visceral need to be right. Think of the last time you were in a disagreement. It may have been a political debate with a family member, a strategic argument with a colleague at work, or even a trivial online dispute with a complete stranger. Notice what happens in your body. There's a tightening in the chest, a quickening of the pulse. The conversation ceases to be an exchange of ideas and becomes a subtle battlefield. We stop listening to understand. We start listening for flaws, for weaknesses in the other person's argument, so we can launch our counterattack. Why does this feel so personal? Why does a simple difference of opinion feel like a threat to our very being? It is because we have fused our sense of self with our opinions. My belief is not something I have, it is something I am. When you challenge my belief, you are not just questioning an idea, you are questioning me. This clinging to views is a sophisticated defense mechanism of the ego. The world, as we know from the truth of Anicca, is a chaotic, unpredictable, and constantly changing place. Our opinions, beliefs, and worldviews are the mental maps we create to navigate this uncertainty. They give us a sense of order, predictability, and control. This map makes us feel safe. When someone presents evidence or an argument that contradicts our map, it feels as if the ground is shaking beneath our feet. Our sense of safety is threatened. Therefore, winning the argument, proving that our map is the correct one, becomes a desperate act of self-preservation. We fight not for the truth, but to restore the feeling of stability and to reinforce the solidness of the very ego construct we have worked so hard to build. In Buddhist philosophy, a view or an opinion is called Dukkha. The Buddha taught that having views is natural and unavoidable. We need them to function in the world. The problem, the root of suffering, is not in having views, but in clinging to them, a state known as Ditthi Upadana. This is when the map, which is meant to be a useful tool, is mistaken for the territory itself. It is when our perspective, which is by its nature limited, is mistaken for the absolute ultimate truth. This clinging to views is one of the most potent sources of conflict and suffering on our planet, from the smallest arguments that create rifts in our families to the large-scale dogmas that fuel wars and division. Everyone is holding tightly to their own map, absolutely convinced that their map is the only true one, and that all other maps are dangerously wrong. The classic Buddhist parable that illustrates this human predicament is the story of the blind men and the elephant. A king in a distant land brought an elephant into his courtyard and summoned a group of men who had been blind from birth. He invited them to approach the great animal and describe what it was. The first man reached out and touched the elephant's thick, sturdy leg. "I see," he declared confidently, "an elephant is like a great living pillar." The second man got a hold of the elephant's tail. He pulled on it and said, "You are mistaken. An elephant is not like a pillar at all. It is like a thick rope." The third man happened to touch one of the elephant's sharp tusks. "You are both fools," he exclaimed. "An elephant is hard, smooth, and dangerous like a spear." A fourth man reached up and felt the elephant's enormous, flapping ear. "This is astonishing," he said. "An elephant is like a large, rough fan." Another man grasped the writhing trunk and shouted, "No, it is like a great snake." Having each had their own direct, tangible experience, the men immediately fell into a furious argument. Each was completely certain of their own conclusion and utterly unable to understand how the others could be so wrong. They shouted at one another, each defending their own partial truth as if it were the whole truth. The king, watching this unfold, was deeply amused and deeply saddened. He explained to them, "You are all right and you are all wrong. Each of you has accurately described the part of the elephant you have touched. but none of you has seen the whole elephant. We are all these blind men. Our life experience, our education, our culture, our family upbringing, these things give us access to one small part of the great elephant of reality. We touch the leg, and we spend the rest of our lives arguing passionately that the world is a pillar. The person next to us has touched the tusk, and they argue with equal passion that the world is a spear. Our arguments are based on our own limited direct experience, which makes us feel incredibly certain and righteous. Wisdom begins with the profound, humbling realization that we are all blind, and we are all touching only one small part of a reality that is far vaster and more complex than any single perspective can possibly contain. This understanding, when taken to heart, can radically transform our communication. We can shift our intention in conversations from a battle of egos to a collaborative exploration. The primary practice for this is deep listening. When another person is speaking, especially when they are expressing a view that contradicts your own, suspend the voice in your head that is constantly formulating a rebuttal. Instead, listen with the genuine curiosity of an explorer. Ask yourself, why do they see it this way? What part of the elephant are they touching? What life experiences have led them to this conclusion? You are listening not to agree or disagree, but simply to understand. This is a profound act of respect and compassion. It instantly de-escalates conflict and creates a space for genuine connection. Following deep listening is the practice of wise speech. When it is your turn to speak, you notice your own intention. Are you trying to prove a point, to win, to make the other person feel wrong? Or are you trying to share your own perspective as your own perspective, a contribution to a larger picture? You can use language that reflects this humility. Instead of stating your opinion as a fact, this is how it is, you can say, from my perspective, or the way I see it based on my experience is. This small change in language acknowledges that you, too, are only describing one part of the elephant. It invites dialogue, not debate. In this way, we can even come to see the experience of being proven wrong, not as a failure, but as a gift. In our culture, being wrong is equated with humiliation and defeat. But from this new perspective, realizing you are wrong is a moment of pure grace. It means you have just been given a precious opportunity to expand your understanding. Someone has just shown you a different part of the elephant you had never touched before. To let go of a wrong view is to let go of an illusion, and any act of letting go of illusion is an act of liberation. It makes your map of the world bigger, more accurate, and more useful. Letting go of the need to be right is not a sign of weakness. It does not mean becoming a passive person with no principles or values. On the contrary, it requires immense strength and confidence. It is the strength to prioritize connection over ego, the confidence to value wisdom over being correct. It is the humility to understand that the world is complex and our view is always, always incomplete. It is the compassion to look at the person arguing with us and see not an adversary, but another blind man describing his part of the elephant with the same conviction we feel for our own. Letting go of our fierce attachment to being right softens our entire stance toward the world. It makes us less rigid, more curious, and more open. This new suppleness of mind is an essential prerequisite for dealing with one of the most powerful and destructive emotional states we experience, a state often born from the feeling that we, or someone else, has been terribly wronged. We can now use this newfound spaciousness to approach the hot, burning fire of anger and resentment. Having learned to soften our hearts through the practice of metta and to release our tight grip on our own rigid opinions, we are now prepared to approach one of the most powerful and challenging energies in the human heart. It is a smoldering fire that, if left untended, can burn down the entire landscape of our inner peace. It is the destructive fire of anger and its long, lingering smoke, the toxic residue of resentment. So many of us carry this fire within us. We carry the memory of a past hurt, a betrayal, an injustice. We hold on to it, stoking the embers with our thoughts, rehearsing the story of how we were wronged. And we do this because we believe, on some deep level, that our anger is a weapon we can use against the person who hurt us. We believe it keeps us safe, that it honors our pain. The Buddha offered a different and radical perspective. He said that holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. Your resentment does not harm the other person. They are likely living their life completely unaware of the turmoil within you. The anger, the bitterness, the obsessive thoughts, they are a poison that you drink, hoping that the other person will die. The fire you are so carefully tending is burning only one house, your own. Letting go of anger, then, is not a gift to the person who wronged you. It is a profound act of compassion and liberation for yourself. It is the choice to finally put down the hot coal. To work skillfully with this fire, we must first understand what fuels it. Anger rarely appears out of nowhere. It is almost always a secondary emotion, a powerful reaction to a deeper, more vulnerable experience. Often, anger is the explosive energy of a thwarted desire. We desperately wanted something of promotion, a loving response from a partner, a bit of respect, and our will was blocked. Anger is the raw energy of that blocked will, lashing out at the perceived obstacle. At other times, anger is a defense mechanism for a threatened ego. When someone insults us, questions our intelligence, or challenges our deeply held identity, the ego feels under attack. Anger is its primitive defense, a way of puffing itself up to appear powerful and scare away the threat. Most frequently, however, anger is a hard, protective shell around a soft, vulnerable core of pain. Underneath the fiery blaze of anger, you will almost always find the tender sting of hurt, the cold dread of fear, or the deep ache of sadness. These feelings are vulnerable. To feel hurt is to feel weak. To feel afraid is to feel powerless. Anger, by contrast, feels powerful. It provides a surge of energy, a sense of righteousness and control. So, unconsciously, we perform an emotional alchemy. We transmute the vulnerable gold of our true pain into the hard, protective iron of anger. It feels safer, but it cuts us off from our own heart and from the possibility of true healing. The first step in learning to work with this fire is to develop the mindful capacity to see the spark before it becomes an all-consuming blaze. Anger often feels like it explodes out of nowhere, but if we pay close attention, we can learn to detect its subtle beginnings: a flicker of irritation, a tightening in the jaw, a flash of judgmental thought. The practice is to catch it at this stage. When you notice irritation or anger arising, the first step is simply to recognize it without judgment. Mentally whisper to yourself, "Ah, anger is here." This simple act of naming it creates a crucial space. You are no longer possessed by the anger. You are the one who is aware of anger. The second and most critical step is to immediately drop your attention out of the story in your head and into the raw physical sensations in your body. The story is the fuel for the fire. The story is, "How dare they say that to me? They have no respect. I'm going to tell them." This mental narrative is what causes the anger to spiral out of control. Instead of feeding the story, we shift our focus completely. Where do you feel the anger in your body? Is it a hot, flushing sensation in your face and chest? Is it a tense clamping in your jaw? Are your fists clenched? Is there a roiling, burning knot in your stomach? Just be with these pure physical energies. Don't judge them. Don't try to make them go away. Simply observe them with a steady, curious attention. Breathe into them. Imagine your breath creating space around the tightness, around the heat. By focusing on the raw energy in the body, you cut off the anger's fuel supply. The storyline withers, and the fire, without more wood to burn, naturally begins to lose its intensity and burn itself out. There is a powerful story from the life of the Buddha that illustrates a masterful way of relating to the anger of others, a way that prevents it from ever becoming our own. One day, as the Buddha was peacefully walking through a village, a man who held a deep animosity towards him and his teachings came rushing out of his house. He stood in front of the Buddha and unleashed a torrent of the most vicious and obscene insults imaginable. The Buddha did not react. He simply stood in silence with a calm and compassionate presence and listened patiently until the man, breathless and exhausted from his own rage, finally fell silent. The Buddha then asked him a simple question. "My friend," he said, "if you prepare a gift for someone and you offer it to them, but that person does not accept your gift, to whom does the gift then belong?" The man, though still angry, was puzzled by the strange question. He thought for a moment and replied, "Well, if they don't accept it, then it still belongs to me, of course. I'm the one who bought it." The Buddha smiled gently. "Exactly," he said, "and so it is with your anger. For the last several minutes, you have offered me the gift of your insults and your rage. I do not accept your gift." And with that, he turned and continued his walk, leaving the man stunned and speechless in the middle of the road. This story teaches us that we have a choice. We do not have to internalize the negativity and anger of others. We do not have to accept the gift. It only becomes our burden, our hot coal, if we choose to pick it up, to take it personally, to let it wound our ego. We can, with practice, develop the inner stability to let another person's anger remain their own problem. This is not weakness. This is profound emotional strength. It is the wisdom of refusing to drink the poison someone else is trying to serve you. In addition to this mindful non-acceptance, we can actively apply two powerful antidotes to cool the lingering embers of resentment. The first is wisdom. This is the practice of looking at the person who hurt us and trying to see them not as a two-dimensional villain, but as a complex, suffering human being. We reflect that their harmful actions almost certainly arose from their own pain, their own ignorance, their own fear. Hurt people hurt people. This does not excuse their behavior, but it depersonalizes it. It helps us see their action as a symptom of their own dukkha, rather than a personal attack on us. This understanding begins to soften the hard edges of our bitterness. The second antidote is compassion, the practice of metta. This can be the most difficult practice of all, but also the most healing. In our meditation, we can try to extend wishes of goodwill even to the person who has harmed us. We can wish for them to be free from the very anger, greed, and ignorance that caused them to act as they did. Again, this is not for their benefit, it is for ours. Wishing them peace is the most effective way to bring peace into our own heart. We are not saying what you did is okay. We are saying, I will no longer allow what you did to poison my life today. Anger is a powerful binding energy. It traps us in the past and fills our present with bitterness. Letting it go is a process of unbinding ourselves. We learn to see the fire for what it is, a painful, destructive force. We practice catching the sparks with mindfulness before they rage. We learn to refuse the gift of another's rage, and we apply the cooling waters of wisdom and compassion to our own smoldering resentments. To release anger is to put down the hot coal, to heal our own hand, and to walk forward into the freedom of a heart at peace. Learning to release the fiery grip of anger and resentment frees up immense mental and emotional energy. We begin to see how much of our inner turmoil comes from clinging to intangible things, like our pride, our reputation, or our need for respect. This very same pattern of clinging, suffering, and release applies with equal force to the tangible things we strive so hard to accumulate and protect in the outer world. We now turn our attention from the inner world of emotion to the outer world of possessions to explore the subtle, gilded prison of materialism. We have journeyed deep into the inner world, learning to release our grip on the intangible things that cause us so much pain, our need to be right, our resentments, our regrets, and our anxieties. This practice of letting go creates a profound sense of inner spaciousness and peace. Now, we must turn our attention from the inner landscape to the outer one, to our relationship with the material world. Our modern culture, more than any before it, is a culture of accumulation. We are taught from a young age that happiness is something to be purchased, that success is measured by what we own, and that the answer to our inner emptiness can be found in the next shopping cart. We are invited to live in a beautiful, gilded cage filled with dazzling comforts and endless entertainment. It looks like the pinnacle of freedom, but we must ask ourselves, is a cage, no matter how comfortable, ever truly freedom? The spiritual path of letting go invites us to question this fundamental assumption. It suggests that our relentless pursuit of material things is a profound misunderstanding, a misplaced search for lasting happiness in a place where it can never be found. At the heart of this misunderstanding is a psychological phenomenon that modern researchers call the hedonic treadmill. It is a cycle that perfectly describes the Buddhist concepts of thirst, tanha, and dissatisfaction, dukkha, as they play out in our consumer lives. The cycle works like this. First, a desire is born. We see an advertisement for a new phone, a friend's post about a luxury vacation, or a neighbor's brand new car. A thought arises, if I had that, I would be happy. This is the thirst. Second, we enter a period of striving. We work extra hours, we save money, we plan and anticipate. This phase is often filled with a kind of pleasant excitement, the thrill of the chase. Third comes the moment of acquisition. We buy the phone, book the trip, or drive the new car off the lot. In this moment, there is a genuine surge of pleasure, a feeling of satisfaction and accomplishment. We have quenched the thirst. But then comes the fourth and most crucial stage, adaptation. Very quickly, often in a matter of weeks or even days, the novelty wears off. The new phone just becomes my phone. The new car is simply how we get to work. The new, higher standard of living becomes our new normal. The pleasure fades, but the payments remain. Finally, we arrive at the fifth stage, a return to our baseline level of dissatisfaction. We find ourselves back where we started, but now with a new problem. The phone that once seemed so incredible now seems slow and outdated compared to the next model. Our neighbor has an even newer car. The hedonic treadmill has just sped up. We are back on the hunt, this time for something bigger, better, and more expensive, convinced that this time the happiness will be permanent. It is an exhausting, endless race toward a horizon that is always receding. But the suffering caused by materialism is not just in this exhausting chase. It is also in the hidden burdens that come with our possessions. The more we have, the more we have to fear. We worry about our possessions being broken, scratched, or stolen. We spend our time and energy maintaining them, insuring them, protecting them. Our possessions, which were meant to serve us, begin to possess us. Our homes become museums of anxiety. Furthermore, in our hyper-connected world, materialism fuels the deeply painful fire of social comparison. We look at the carefully curated images of other people's lives and possessions on social media, and we feel a gnawing sense of lack. Our acquisitions are no longer about our own needs or comfort. They become moves in a silent, competitive game of status. We buy things not because we need them, but to show others and ourselves that we are successful, that we are worthy. This creates a toxic inner environment of envy, jealousy, and perpetual inadequacy. The Buddhist path offers a radical alternative. It proposes that true wealth is not found in the accumulation of more, but in the cultivation of contentment with what is already here. This is the virtue of santuti, or simplicity. It is not about forced poverty or rejecting the world, but about finding an inner richness that is independent of external conditions. There is a classic Zen story that illuminates this state of mind with heartbreaking beauty. A Zen master named Ryokan lived a life of profound simplicity in a small rustic hut at the base of a mountain. His only possessions were a sleeping mat, a bowl for his food, and the simple robe he wore. One evening, a thief, believing the hut must contain some hidden treasure, quietly broke in. He rummaged through the small space in the dark, growing more and more frustrated as he found nothing of value. Ryokan, who had been sitting in silent meditation, saw the man's predicament. He felt not anger or fear, but a deep sense of pity for the thief. "My friend," Ryokan said softly, "you have come such a long way to visit me. You must not leave empty-handed." He untied the simple robe from his own body. "Please," he said, "take this as a gift." The thief, completely bewildered by this reaction, grabbed the robe and fled into the night. Ryokan sat naked in the cool night air, looking out the doorway of his now empty hut. The sky was clear, and a full, brilliant moon hung in the sky, bathing the landscape in a silvery light. He thought to himself, "Poor fellow, I wish I could have given him this beautiful moon." This story reveals the nature of true wealth. The thief, obsessed with material gain, was utterly impoverished, even when he had stolen the master's only possession. Ryokan, on the other hand, who had nothing, was immeasurably rich. His wealth was his inner peace, his boundless compassion that could feel pity for a man trying to rob him, and his ability to appreciate the simple, profound beauty of the present momenta. Beauty, like the moon, that can be experienced but never owned. He was so free from attachment that losing his last possession meant nothing to him compared to the joy of what he could never lose. How do we begin to cultivate this inner wealth, this freedom from the tyranny of more? We can start with a simple, powerful practice, the practice of gratitude. Our minds are conditioned by our culture to constantly scan for what is missing, for the next thing we need to acquire. Gratitude is the conscious act of retraining our attention to notice the abundance that is already present in our lives. You can try this tonight. Before you go to sleep, take a few quiet moments to consciously bring to mind 3 things for which you are genuinely grateful. They do not need to be monumental. Perhaps it was the warmth of the sun on your face during your lunch break. Perhaps it was the simple pleasure of a hot cup of coffee or tea. Perhaps it was a kind word from a colleague, a moment of connection with a loved one, or simply the incredible, often overlooked gift of a body that can see, hear, and breathe. By consciously focusing on what we have, we begin to loosen the grip of what we lack. We shift our perspective from one of scarcity to one of abundance. We realize that the most valuable things in our lives, love, friendship, peace of mind, the beauty of the natural world, are not things that can be bought in a store. They are the real treasures. This does not mean we must live a life of stark asceticism. It simply means we learn to hold our possessions lightly. We can enjoy them for their usefulness and beauty without making our happiness dependent upon them. We can use them without being used by them. True wealth, then, is not having what you want, but wanting what you have. It is an inner state of contentment that is unshakable because it does not depend on the fluctuating fortunes of the external world. By letting go of our desperate clinging to things, we discover that we are not impoverished, but are in fact enriched with a profound sense of peace, freedom, and gratitude. As we loosen our grip on the things of the outer world, we begin to notice the underlying mechanism that drove the accumulation in the first place, a deep-seated need for security, safety, and control. We believe that if we can control our environment, our possessions, and our image, then we will be safe from the unpredictable, impermanent nature of life. We must now turn our attention from the objects of our clinging to the fundamental grasping itself, the very urge to control our lives. We have journeyed through the landscapes of past and future, learning to release the burdens of regret and anxiety. We have examined our relationship with the material world, seeing the wisdom in loosening our grip on possessions. Underlying all of these habits of clinging, there is a single, powerful engine at work, a fundamental assumption that drives so much of our struggle. It is the master illusion of the ego, the belief that our job is to control the world. From this illusion springs the deep and relentless need to manage outcomes, to direct the behavior of other people, and to force life to conform to our meticulously drawn blueprints. We appoint ourselves the chief executive officer of the universe, and we are surprised when we end up feeling stressed, frustrated, and completely exhausted. The spiritual path of letting go invites us to tender our resignation from this impossible job. To begin, we must look with radical honesty at the things we truly cannot control. Consider the weather. You can check the forecast, an act of gathering information. You can decide to wear a coat or bring an umbrella, an act of skillful preparation, but you cannot, through sheer force of will, stop the clouds from gathering or prevent the rain from falling. To stand outside in a downpour, shaking your fist at the sky and demanding that it stop, is a perfect image of insanity. And yet, this is exactly how we approach so many areas of our lives. We get angry at the metaphorical rain. Far more significantly, we try to control other people. We believe that if we just argue persuasively enough, love hard enough, or apply enough pressure, we can control what other people think, what they feel, what they say, and what they do. This is an impossible project. Other people's minds and hearts are their own mysterious universes, governed by their own history, their own suffering, and their own perceptions. We can certainly influence others through our own wise and compassionate actions, but we can never truly control them. An enormous portion of our daily frustration, disappointment, and heartache comes from our refusal to accept this fundamental truth. Finally, we cannot control outcomes. We can control our effort. We can control our intention. We cannot control the final result. You can prepare for weeks for a job interview, giving it your absolute best effort, but you cannot control whether you get the job. You can pour your heart into creating a piece of art, but you cannot control how it is received by the public. You can live a healthy lifestyle, but you cannot have absolute control over your health. To attach our inner peace to a specific outcome is to set ourselves up for inevitable suffering, because the universe is a complex web of countless causes and conditions, most of which are far beyond our personal command. This understanding leads us to a powerful model for wise living, sometimes described as the two circles. Imagine a large circle and call it your circle of concern. This circle contains everything that you might worry about or spend mental energy on: global politics, the economy, the traffic, the weather, what your boss thinks of you, whether your kids will be happy. Now, imagine a smaller circle inside that one. Call this your circle of influence. This circle contains the things you have some direct control over: your own actions in this moment, your own words, your attitude, the quality of your effort, how you choose to respond to events. The path of suffering is to spend most of our time and energy fretting about the things in the large circle of concern, the things we cannot change. The path of wisdom and peace is to consciously withdraw our energy from that outer circle and focus it almost entirely within our circle of influence. We stop trying to control the weather, and we focus on learning how to build a better raincoat and, perhaps, even how to dance in the rain. There is a simple parable of two gardeners that illustrates this principle perfectly. Both gardeners have beautiful gardens, but both are plagued by caterpillars that are eating the leaves of their plants. The first gardener is a controller. He is obsessed with eliminating the problem directly. Every morning, he rises at dawn and begins the exhausting task of inspecting every single leaf in his garden, picking off every caterpillar he can find, one by one. He is meticulous and hardworking, but he's also constantly stressed, angry, and anxious. The moment he finishes, he sees a new caterpillar has appeared. His work is never done. He is at war with the caterpillars, and though his garden is surviving, he is completely miserable. He is pouring all his energy into his circle of concern, the pests themselves. The second gardener sees the caterpillars, but her approach is entirely different. She decides to focus her energy on what she can actually control. Instead of picking off the caterpillars, she focuses on enriching the soil. She adds compost and nutrients. She ensures her plants get the perfect amount of water and sunlight. She cultivates other plants nearby that naturally repel pests, and she introduces beneficial insects, like ladybugs, that are the caterpillar's natural predators. She focuses all her energy on creating an environment of vibrant, unshakable health. Her plants become so strong and resilient that the caterpillars are no longer a major threat. They might nibble a leaf here and there, but the garden as a whole thrives. And the gardener is at peace, working in harmony with nature. She is pouring her energy into her circle of influence, the health and condition of the soil. We are all the gardeners of our own lives. We can choose to exhaust ourselves by trying to control every external problem, every person's behavior, every outcome, endlessly picking off caterpillars. Or we can choose the wiser path to focus our energy inward. We can work on enriching our own inner soil. We can cultivate our own mindfulness, our own compassion, our own resilience. When our inner life is healthy and strong, we are naturally better able to withstand the inevitable pests and storms that life sends our way. We stop trying to control the world and instead focus on cultivating the wisdom to meet the world as it is. This shift from control to trust can be supported by a simple physical and mental practice. The feeling of control is a clenched fist. It is tight, rigid, tense, and ready for a fight. The feeling of letting go is an open hand. It is relaxed, receptive, and at ease. When you notice yourself falling into a pattern of control, trying to force a conversation to go your way, obsessing over a project's outcome, trying to manage someone's feelings first, just notice the feeling of the clenched fist in your mind and body. Notice the tension in your shoulders, the tightness in your jaw, the knot in your stomach. Then, as a conscious practice, intentionally uncurl the fingers of your mind. Physically relax your shoulders, unclench your jaw. You can even literally open the palms of your hands on your lap. As you make this physical gesture of opening, create a matching mental intention. Silently say to yourself, I will do my part with skill and care, and I release the outcome. I trust the process. May I meet what comes with peace. This simple act of embodying the open hand can powerfully shift your entire state of being from one of fearful struggle to one of trustful ease. True power is not found in the brittle, exhausting effort of controlling the world. It is found in the supple, resilient strength of controlling our own response to the world. By letting go of the impossible, godlike task of managing every variable, we are not rendered powerless. On the contrary, we are freed from a crushing burden. We reclaim all the energy we were wasting in the circle of concern and bring it back to where it can make a real difference. We stop fighting the great river of life and learn, at last, how to flow with it. This practice of releasing control over outcomes and other people brings a profound sense of peace. It untangles us from endless, exhausting battles. Much of this struggle for control is driven by a deep-seated fear of how others perceive us. We try to control their actions and the outcomes of situations to ensure they think well of us and to avoid their disapproval. We must now turn to the source of that fear itself, the persistent, phantom echo of judgment in our own minds. We have explored the practice of letting go of control over the world and other people, recognizing the immense peace that comes from focusing on our own small circle of influence. Yet, even as we relinquish this outer control, we remain beholden to an inner tyrant, a force that dictates so much of our behavior and causes a constant, low-grade anxiety. This tyrant is our fear of judgment. We live as though we are on a vast stage, performing our lives for an invisible and often critical audience. We are constantly adjusting our costume, tweaking our lines, and managing our performance based on the imagined praise or blame of this audience. This endless performance, this desperate attempt to manage the opinions of others, is utterly exhausting, and it is the very opposite of a free and authentic life. To dismantle this prison of fear, we must first examine its fundamentally flawed logic. Our fear is based on the assumption that we can and should control what other people think of us. But as we have already seen, this is an impossible task. The minds of other people are their own private universes, shaped by their unique histories, their moods, their insecurities, and their own rigid beliefs. Trying to control another person's opinion of you is as futile as trying to control their dreams. Furthermore, we operate under the delusion that we even know what they are thinking. The truth is, we are not mind readers. We project our own inner critic onto the people around us. We assume they are dissecting our flaws and judging our shortcomings because that is what our own mind is so often doing to us. The reality is that most people are far too absorbed in the drama of their own lives to be paying that much attention to ours. Even if they are judging us, we must see that their judgment is not a statement of absolute truth. It is a reflection of them. Their opinion of you says more about their own values, their own biases, and their own state of mind than it does about your inherent worth. If a person who values aggression thinks you are weak because you are gentle, that is a reflection of their values, not a fact about your character. If a person in a bitter mood finds fault with your cheerful demeanor, that is a reflection of their bitterness. We make the profound mistake of taking another person's subjective, fleeting opinion and treating it as objective, permanent reality. We allow their inner weather to become our own. The Buddhist tradition offers a powerful framework for understanding this dynamic, known as the 8 worldly winds. These are the 8 conditions of life that are constantly blowing, seeking to knock us off our center. They come in 4 pairs of opposites: pleasure and pain, gain and loss, fame and disrepute, and the one most relevant here, praise and blame. The Buddha taught that an ordinary, unenlightened person is like a leaf in the wind, completely at the mercy of these forces. When the wind of praise blows, we are lifted high into elation. We feel validated, worthy, and happy. When the wind of blame blows, we are dashed to the ground, crushed by shame and despair. We become addicts, desperate for the next hit of praise and terrified of the slightest hint of criticism. Our inner peace is entirely dependent on forces outside of our control. The goal of spiritual practice is to stop being a leaf and to become a mountain. A mountain is stable, solid, and unmovable. The winds of praise and blame still blow. They will always blow, but the mountain is not affected. It does not get taller when praised or shrink when blamed. It remains grounded in its own immense, unshakable presence. This quality of unshakable inner balance is called equanimity, or upekkha. The life of the Buddha himself is the perfect illustration of this mountain-like stability. He was constantly subjected to the full force of the 8 worldly winds. He was praised by kings, merchants, and devoted followers, who sometimes saw him as a god among men. And he was simultaneously blamed and slandered by his rivals, who called him a charlatan, a fraud, and a corrupter of youth. He gained thousands of followers, and he experienced the loss of followers, such as when his own cousin led a schism in the community. Through all of this, his inner peace remained undisturbed. He was not inflated by the praise, nor was he diminished by the blame. Why was he so stable? Because his actions were not motivated by a desire for external approval. He was not performing for an audience. His words and deeds flowed from a deep, internal wellspring of his own direct knowledge, wisdom, and compassion. He was guided by his own inner compass, his unwavering commitment to truth and to the alleviation of suffering. He knew the purity of his own intention. Compared to the authority of that inner compass, the shifting winds of public opinion were just noise. He had so thoroughly anchored his sense of well-being inside himself that the praise or blame of the world could not touch him. This is the path to our own freedom. We must learn to shift the basis of our self-worth from the external to the internal. We must learn to navigate by our own inner compass. This is a practice we can cultivate in our daily lives. Before you enter a potentially difficult situation, a challenging meeting at work, a sensitive family conversation, take a moment to become quiet and connect with your deepest intention. Ask yourself, what is my highest aspiration in this situation? How do I want to show up? Perhaps your intention is to be kind. Perhaps it is to be honest and clear. Perhaps it is to be helpful or to act with integrity. Clarify the skillful intention in your own mind. This is you, finding your true north. Then, as you enter the situation, let your words and actions flow from this compass. Focus all your energy on acting in alignment with your chosen intention. This is your circle of influence. This is the only part you can truly control. And after you have acted, after you have said your piece with as much integrity as you can muster, you must practice the final, crucial step. You release the outcome. You let go of the need for a specific response. You let go of needing their approval, their agreement, or their praise. You have done your part. Their reaction is their karma. It belongs to them. Your peace comes from knowing that you acted in alignment with your own values, not from receiving a reward from the external world. When we live this way, we gradually untangle our well-being from the chaotic and unpredictable opinions of others. We stop asking, "What will they think of me?" and start asking, "What is the kindest and wisest way I can respond right now?" We stop living from the outside in and start living from the inside out. Our center of gravity shifts. We find a source of self-worth that is intrinsic, stable, and cannot be taken away from us. We find the freedom that comes from stepping off the stage, taking off the mask, and ending the exhausting performance. We find the quiet dignity of the mountain that allows the winds to blow as they will, remaining peaceful, grounded, and utterly unmoved. As we become more anchored in our own intention and less swayed by the praise and blame of others, we develop a new kind of inner resilience. This resilience gives us the courage to take risks, to be vulnerable, and to face one of the most powerful agents of social judgment, the possibility of failure. To truly be free, we must not only let go of our fear of what others think, but also our own harsh judgment of our perceived shortcomings. We must now turn our attention to our relationship with making mistakes. We have been learning to stand with stability as the winds of praise and blame blow around us, anchoring ourselves in the quiet integrity of our own intention rather than the noisy validation of others. This growing resilience gives us the courage to live more boldly, to venture out of our carefully constructed comfort zones. But the moment we take a risk, the moment we try something new or reach for something greater, we encounter another deep and powerful fear, the specter of failure. In our modern culture, failure is often treated as the ultimate shame. It is seen as a final verdict on our talent, our intelligence, and our worth. This fear is a potent paralytic. It keeps us playing small. It convinces us not to apply for the challenging job, not to start the creative project, not to speak our truth, not to open our heart to love. We choose the safety of the familiar shoreline over the vast, unknown ocean because we are terrified of the possibility that our ship might sink. The Buddhist path invites us to completely reframe our relationship with failure. It asks us to see failure not as a verdict, but as an education. It is not an endpoint, but a vital part of the process of learning and growth. Our culture's view of failure is fundamentally flawed. We see it as a declaration of inadequacy. The business failed, therefore, I am a bad entrepreneur. The relationship ended, therefore, I am unlovable. I got the answer wrong, therefore, I am stupid. We create a direct and painful link between the outcome of an action and the core of our identity. This fusion of action and identity is the very source of the shame associated with failure. The wisdom of Anatta, or no self, provides the sharp tool we need to cut this link. It reminds us that we are not a fixed, solid entity that can be branded as a failure. We are a dynamic process. When an action does not produce the desired result, the practice is to mindfully separate the event from the story of self. We can learn to say, the strategy I used was not effective, instead of, I am incompetent. We can say, that action did not lead to the intended outcome, instead of, I am a loser. This is not just a semantic trick. It is a profound shift in perspective. It moves us from the realm of personal shame to the realm of objective curiosity. We stop berating the doer and start calmly examining the deed. Why didn't that approach work? What variables were at play? What information have I gained from this outcome? Failure, seen in this light, ceases to be a personal indictment and becomes invaluable data. In science, a failed experiment is not a cause for shame. It is a source of crucial information that guides the next experiment. Our lives can be approached with the same spirit of open, curious inquiry. There is a beautiful parable that illustrates this wise and compassionate relationship with imperfection, the parable of the potter. Imagine a master potter sitting at her wheel. Her hands, covered in wet clay, are steady and skilled. She works with a focused, loving attention, and a beautiful, elegant vase begins to rise from the spinning lump of clay. But then, perhaps the clay is a little too wet, or her touch is a fraction too strong, and the form suddenly collapses into a shapeless mound. In another instance, she creates a perfectly shaped pot, places it carefully in the fiery kiln, but when she removes it hours later, a long, thin crack has appeared along its side. Now, imagine the reaction of an unskilled, ego-driven potter. They might curse, throw the collapsed clay against the wall, or smash the cracked pot on the floor in a fit of rage, berating themselves as a failure. But the wise potter does not do this. She looks at the collapsed form, or the cracked pot, not with anger, but with a calm, discerning eye. She sees it not as a personal failure, but as feedback. She thinks, perhaps the clay needed more time to dry. Perhaps the kiln was too hot this time. She sees it as information, as a teacher, and then she does something remarkable. She takes the broken shards of the cracked pot, and she takes the wet, collapsed clay, and she places it all into a large stone basin. She takes a heavy mallet and grinds the hard, broken pieces down into a fine powder. She then mixes this grog, as it's called back into a new batch of wet clay. She knows a secret that the unskilled potter does not. She knows that the failures are not waste. They are, in fact, an essential ingredient. The grog, the ground-up remains of the broken pots, adds strength, texture, and stability to the new clay. It makes the next generation of pots less likely to warp or crack in the fire. The potter understands that her past failures are the very material that makes her future creations stronger and more resilient. Our lives are just like this. Our failures, our mistakes, our heartbreaks, they are the grog. If we are willing to learn from them, to patiently grind them down with reflection, and integrate them with wisdom, they become the very source of our strength, our character, and our resilience. Hiding our failures in shame is like throwing away the most valuable ingredient we have for building a stronger self. This wise attitude toward failure is supported by the active practice of self-compassion. When you make a mistake, when you fail at something, take a moment to notice the voice that immediately speaks in your mind. For many of us, it is the voice of a harsh, unforgiving critic. You idiot. How could you be so stupid? You always mess things up. This voice only deepens the wound and paralyzes us with shame. The practice is to intentionally replace this voice with the voice of a compassionate friend. Think of what you would say to a dear friend who just made the same mistake. You would likely not scream at them. You would probably say something like, "It's okay. That was incredibly difficult. You were brave to even try. Don't be so hard on yourself. What can we learn from this for next time?" We can and must learn to speak to ourselves with the same kindness and encouragement. This is the practice of karuna, or compassion. It is the soothing balm that allows us to get back up after we fall, instead of lying on the ground, consumed by self-recrimination. When we are no longer terrified of failure, we become free. We are free to be creative, to be adventurous, to be vulnerable. We understand that some endeavors will succeed and some will fail, and that both outcomes are valuable parts of a rich and interesting life. We start to see each mistake not as a mark against our name, but as an opportunity to practice. An opportunity to practice patience with ourselves. An opportunity to practice humility, letting go of the need to be perfect. And an opportunity to practice letting go of our attachment to a specific outcome, which is the heart of freedom itself. We transform our relationship with failure by seeing it not as a verdict on our permanent worth, but as a temporary and valuable teacher. It is feedback, it is data, it is the raw material for our own growth. Each time we miss the mark, we are being given a chance to look at ourselves with a kinder, more forgiving eye, to embrace our own imperfect, striving, and beautiful humanity. As we learn to embrace our mistakes and see the value in our failures, we begin to let go of the impossible demand for a perfect, flawless life. We start to see that the cracks and the broken pieces are not things to be hidden in shame, but are integral, even beautiful, parts of our human journey. This leads us to a deeper, more profound acceptance of reality itself in all its messy, imperfect glory. It is an appreciation for the beauty of things not in spite of their flaws, but precisely because of them. Our journey of letting go has taken us through the vast territories of our own experience. We have learned to loosen our grip on the past and the future, on our rigid identities, on the need to be right, on anger, on materialism, and on the illusion of control. The common thread running through all of these practices is a gradual turning toward a single profound act, the act of making peace with reality. For most of our lives, we are engaged in a subtle and sometimes not so subtle war with what is. We carry around in our minds an idealized blueprint of how life should be. We have a clear image of the person we should be, how others should act, and how our circumstances should unfold. And the vast majority of our suffering, our frustration, our disappointment, our resentment arises from the gap between this idealized blueprint and the messy, unpredictable, and imperfect reality of life as it actually is. This practice is about calling a truce in that war. It is about learning to accept reality on its own terms and to find the profound beauty that lies hidden in its very imperfection. In our modern Western culture, when something of value breaks, we tend to see it as ruined. A broken cup, a cracked plateed's value is diminished. It is flawed. We either discard it or we try to repair it in a way that makes the crack invisible, to hide the evidence of its history of being broken, to pretend it is as good as new. There is an ancient Japanese art form that offers a radically different and deeply spiritual perspective. It is called kintsugi, which means to join with gold. When a cherished piece of pottery, beautiful bowl, or a treasured teacup is broken, it is not seen as the end of its life. On the contrary, it is seen as the beginning of a new, more beautiful chapter in its history. The artisan carefully collects every broken piece, no matter how small. Then, with painstaking care and reverence, they begin the slow process of reassembling the object. But instead of using a clear, invisible glue to hide the damage, they use a special lacquer that is mixed with gleaming, powdered gold. The result is breathtaking. The finished piece is not a forgery of its former unbroken self. It is something entirely new. The lines of breakage, far from being hidden, are now the most prominent and beautiful feature of the object. They are illuminated with veins of precious gold, creating a unique and intricate pattern. The bowl is now more beautiful, more valuable, and more interesting because it was broken. Its history of damage and repair is not a source of shame, but a celebrated, integral part of its identity. The cracks tell a story of resilience, of transformation, of a life lived. This is the philosophy of kintsugi, to embrace the flawed, the imperfect, and the broken, and to see the beauty and strength that is born from healing. This ancient art form is a perfect and profound metaphor for our own spiritual lives. We are all like that ceramic bowl. Life will inevitably break us in places. We will experience the sharp impact of heartbreak, the shattering loss of a loved one, the deep cracks of failure and disappointment, the slow erosion of illness or old age. No one is exempt from this. Our instinctive cultural response is to feel shame about these cracks. We try to hide them. We put on a brave face, presenting a smooth, unbroken facade to the world. We deny our history of brokenness, pretending we are fine, that we have it all together. We see our scar sore, emotional wounds, our past traumas, our regrets as ugly defects that diminish our worth. The path of kintsugi for the soul is to learn to see ourselves through a different lens. It is the practice of looking at our own cracks with the same reverence and care as the Japanese artisan. Our scars are not ugly. They are the golden seams that tell the story of our survival. Our past failures are not a source of shame. They are the lines that map out our journey of learning and growth. The heartbreak that shattered us also broke our heart open, creating a greater capacity for compassion. The illness that weakened our body also taught us deep lessons about patience and the preciousness of life. The gold is the wisdom, the resilience, the compassion, and the strength that we gain from the very process of healing our broken places. When we learn from a mistake, we are tracing the crack with gold. When we find compassion for ourselves in a moment of pain, we are filling the fissure with gold. To accept ourselves fully, to love ourselves unconditionally, means to embrace our entire being, including our unique and beautiful pattern of cracks. It is to understand that we are not beautiful in spite of our brokenness, but precisely because of it. It is vital to distinguish this profound acceptance from passive resignation. Resignation is a state of collapsed, hopeless apathy. It is the voice that says, "Life is terrible, and there is nothing I can do about it, so I give up." It is a defeated energy. Acceptance, on the other hand, is an empowered, clear-eyed, and courageous state. It is the ability to look at a situation with absolute honesty and say, "This is the reality I am facing right now. These are the broken pieces in front of me." Acceptance is the essential first step that allows us to then ask the wise and compassionate question, from this place of truth, what is the most skillful next step? How can I begin to mindfully gather these pieces and mend them with the gold of my wisdom and compassion? Think again of the gardener. Resignation is letting the weeds completely take over the garden and choke out all the flowers. Acceptance is acknowledging that weeds are a natural and inevitable part of a garden's ecosystem. It is understanding their nature and then skillfully and patiently tending to the soil, providing water and sunlight so that the flowers have the strength to thrive alongside the weeds. Acceptance is not giving up on the garden. It is the very foundation of wise and effective gardening. It is working with reality, not being defeated by it. When we can begin to live in this state of radical acceptance, we let go of the immense and exhausting burden of fighting with life. The relentless pursuit of a perfect, flawless existence, a life without cracks, without weeds, without pain is a direct path to constant misery, because such a life is a fantasy. It does not exist. True peace of mind is not the achievement of a perfect life. It is the development of a peaceful heart in the midst of our inevitably imperfect one. It is the profound peace of the kintsugi bowl, which sits in a state of quiet dignity, made whole and beautiful not by avoiding breakage, but by transforming it. We find our freedom not by demanding that reality conform to our ideals, but by learning to love reality as it is. We stop waiting for a future moment when all our problems will be solved and all our flaws will be erased. We stop holding our breath. We begin to breathe into the life we actually have, with all its messiness, its challenges, its sorrows, and its profound, heartbreaking beauty. When we embrace the imperfect kintsugi beauty of our own lives, a remarkable shift occurs. We stop chasing an imaginary state of flawless happiness. We stop waiting for all the pieces of our life to be perfectly arranged before we allow ourselves to feel joy. This opens the door to a different kind of happiness, altogether a quiet, unconditional joy that is not dependent on external circumstances, but arises from the simple, profound act of being present with life just as it is. We have walked a long and sometimes difficult path of letting go, and in doing so, we have arrived at a place of profound acceptance. We have learned to embrace the imperfect kintsugi beauty of our lives, seeing the golden wisdom in our cracks and scars. When we stop fighting reality, when we lay down our arms in the long war against what is, a remarkable space opens up. It is in this space of acceptance that we can discover something we have been searching for all our lives, often in all the wrong places. We can discover the nature of true happiness. For most of us, the pursuit of happiness is a geographical quest. We believe happiness is a destination on a map, a future place we will arrive at once we acquire the right partner, the right job, the right home, or the right amount of money in the bank. We spend our entire lives as spiritual tourists, rushing from one experience to the next, always seeking that one magical location where we will finally be able to unpack our bags and say, I have arrived. I am happy. The wisdom of the Buddhist path suggests that this entire search is based on a fundamental misunderstanding. Happiness is not a destination to be found out there. It is our own fundamental nature. It is the ground on which we are already standing. The work is not to travel to some distant land to find it, but to gently remove all the layers of dust and debris clinging, the aversion, the anxiety, the regret that we have piled on top of it. True, lasting happiness has been here, within us, all along. To understand this, we must first make a crucial distinction between pleasure and genuine happiness. Our culture constantly conflates the two. The happiness our world sells is almost always pleasure, or what the ancient Greeks called hedonia. Hedonistic pleasure is wonderful, but it is entirely dependent on external stimulation. It is the thrill of a new purchase, the delicious taste of a gourmet meal, the excitement of a victory, the sensory rush of a blockbuster movie. It is often loud, intense, and exciting, but it has two defining characteristics. It is always temporary, and it is always dependent on conditions outside of ourselves. The moment the delicious food is gone, the pleasure disappears. The moment the new car gets its first scratch, the thrill begins to fade. Because it is dependent on fleeting, external things, this kind of happiness keeps us on the hedonic treadmill, forever chasing the next stimulus, the next hit of pleasure to stave off the underlying feeling of dissatisfaction. The Buddhist path points toward a different kind of happiness, a deeper and more abiding state of well-being. The Pali word for this is sukha. Sukha is not a fleeting pleasure. It is a profound state of inner contentment, flourishing, and peace. If hedonistic pleasure is like the exciting, crashing foam of a wave on the surface, sukha is like the calm, silent, immeasurable depth of the ocean itself. It is quiet, not loud. It is stable, not volatile. And most importantly, it is not dependent on external conditions. It is a quality that arises from within, from a mind that is balanced, clear, and at ease. It is the peace that is available when we are no longer at war with ourselves. There is a beautiful old story from the East that captures our misguided human search perfectly. It is the story of the musk deer. This is a special kind of deer that has a small gland near its navel which produces an incredibly beautiful, rare, and intoxicating fragrance. One day, the musk deer is walking through the forest when it catches a whiff of this exquisite scent on the breeze. What is that amazing smell, it thinks? It must be coming from a magical flower or a special tree nearby. If I can find the source of that scent, I will be so happy. And so, the deer begins a frantic search. It runs through the forest, sniffing every flower. It climbs mountains, thinking the scent must be at the peak. It crosses rivers, sure that the source lies on the other side. For weeks and months, the deer searches, becoming more and more exhausted, frustrated, and desperate. It is constantly tantalized by the beautiful fragrance, which seems to follow it everywhere it goes, yet it can never find the source. It never once occurs to the poor deer that the magnificent scent it is searching for is emanating from its own body. It is searching the entire world for a treasure it has never lost. We are all that musk deer. We are born with the capacity for deep, intrinsic well-being, for sukha. It is a natural quality of our own awareness when it is not obscured, but we catch a whiff of it, a desire for happiness, and we immediately project it outward. We think it must come from a new relationship, a promotion at work, a bigger house, or a trip to an exotic land. And so we begin our own frantic search, chasing after external things, believing they hold the key to our peace, never realizing that the source of the fragrance is within us. So, if this quiet joy is our nature, how do we uncover it? We do it by cultivating the conditions that allow it to shine forth. The first condition is a quiet mind. The constant agitated chatter of the monkey mind, worrying, planning, judging, regretting is like a layer of thick mud that covers the natural clarity of the water. Through the practice of mindfulness, as we learn to let thoughts come and go without grasping onto them, the mind naturally begins to settle. In this quietness, a gentle joy, a simple contentment in just being, begins to emerge. It is the joy of not being in a state of inner conflict. The second condition is simplicity and gratitude. As we step off the hedonic treadmill and let go of the relentless pursuit of more, we start to notice the profound richness of what is already here. The practice of gratitude actively retrains our attention. Instead of scanning the world for what is missing, we scan for what is present. We begin to find a quiet joy in the things we so often overlook. The complex taste of a simple cup of tea, the feeling of the sun warming our skin, the comfort of a familiar blanket, the incredible gift of a body that breathes all by itself. This is not a dramatic, exciting pleasure, but a soft, warm, and deeply nourishing contentment. The third, and perhaps most important condition, is connection. The ego believes happiness is a solitary achievement, a personal victory. The heart knows that true joy is found in connection. This is where the practice of metta, loving kindness, becomes a source of profound happiness. The sincere wish for the well-being of others, the warmth that comes from a feeling of compassionate connection, is a deep and reliable source of sukha. This extends to the practice of mudita, or sympathetic joy, the ability to feel happy for the good fortune of others. In a culture rife with comparison and envy, mudita is a powerful antidote. To find joy in another's joy is to multiply the sources of happiness in the world infinitely. It is a joy that is generous, expansive, and utterly free from the selfish clinging of the ego. Ultimately, all of these conditions point to the joy of presence. Sukha is not found in a memory of the past or a fantasy of the future. It is found only in the direct, unfiltered experience of the present moment. It is in the willingness to be fully with our lives as they are unfolding right now. It is the joy of truly seeing the face of a loved one, of truly hearing the sound of the rain on the roof, of truly feeling the earth beneath our feet. It is the joy that arises when we stop searching, stop striving, and simply arrive in the life that is already ours. We stop our frantic outward chase for a loud and fleeting pleasure, and instead, we turn inward. We find that we have been the musk deer, searching for a fragrance we have carried with us all along. This quiet joy, this sukha, is the natural radiance of a mind at peace with itself and the world. This quiet joy is the beautiful and peaceful result of all the letting go we have practiced throughout this journey. It leads us to the final great paradox of this entire path, that by releasing our tight, fearful grip on everything, we find that we lose nothing of value and instead gain the whole world. We must now explore what it means to truly live this life of the open hand day by day. We began this journey together with a simple image, a hand on a sandy shore, clenching its fist, trying desperately to hold on to the shifting grains. We saw how the tighter we squeezed, the faster the sand escaped, leaving us only with the ache of our own effort. That clenched fist is the story of a life lived in resistance, a life of clinging. Throughout our journey, we have patiently and gently examined that fist. We identified the ache as dukkha, the fundamental dissatisfaction of a life at war with itself. We saw that the driving force of the clenching was tanha, the insatiable thirst for things to be different. We examined the sand itself, seeing its nature as impermanent, Anicca, and understanding that there was no solid, separate self, Anatta, doing the clenching. With the tools of mindfulness, acceptance, and compassion, we have learned finger by finger to begin to unclench that fist. And now we arrive at the final exploration. What is it like to live with an open hand? What is the nature of the freedom we find when we finally stop grasping? Here, we discover the great and beautiful paradox of the spiritual path. By letting go of everything, we lose nothing of value, and in return, we gain the entire world. How can this be? How can releasing lead to gaining? How can surrender lead to a richer life? This paradox unfolds as we apply the principle of letting go to the very things we thought we needed most for our happiness. Consider our desperate attachment to specific outcomes. When we are clinging to a single desired result, getting the promotion, winning the competition, having a conversation go exactly as we scripted, our actions become tight, fearful, and constrained. We are so afraid of failure that we cannot act with creativity or spontaneity. We are playing not to lose instead of playing to win. But when we let go of our attachment to the outcome, when we make our peace with whatever may happen, a profound liberation occurs. We are free to pour our whole, undivided, joyful energy into the process itself. A musician plays most beautifully when she is completely lost in the act of making music, not when she is anxiously worrying about hitting one wrong note. An artist creates their best work when they are absorbed in the dance of color and form, not when they are obsessing over how the work will be received. By releasing the future result, we are given the gift of the full richness of the present moment. We gain the freedom to act with our entire being. Consider our frantic chase after pleasure. As we have seen, the constant pursuit of hedonistic pleasure keeps us on a treadmill of craving and dissatisfaction. We believe happiness is in the next thrill, the next acquisition. By letting go of this frantic chase, do we lose happiness? Number, we lose the anxiety of the chase itself. We create the inner quiet and space necessary to discover the far deeper, more stable well-being of sukha. We stop chasing the fleeting, crashing waves on the surface and discover the vast, peaceful, immeasurable depth of the ocean that was there all along. By letting go of the need for excitement, we gain the capacity for a quiet, unshakable joy. And consider our tightest possession, our own fixed identity. We cling to the story of me, believing it gives us safety and definition. But as we have seen, this story is a prison. By letting go of the need to be the smart one or the successful one, or even the wounded one, we do not become nothing. We become everything. We gain the freedom to be fluid, to learn, to grow, and to change. We are no longer a brittle statue that can be broken, but a flowing river that can adapt to any terrain. By letting go of the small, constricted self we thought we were, we open up to the boundless potential of who we can be in each new moment. There is a simple metaphor for this entire process. Imagine you are standing before a large, heavy door. The sign on the door, in clear letters, says, "Pull." But you are in a hurry, you are distracted by your thoughts, and you are operating on your lifelong assumption that doors open by pushing. So, you lower your shoulder and you push. The door doesn't budge. You push harder, grunting with effort. You become frustrated, then angry. You start to blame the door. What a stupid, stubborn, badly designed door. Your entire world shrinks to this struggle. Your reality is defined by this conflict between you and this immovable object. This is a life lived with clinging, a life spent pushing against the nature of reality. Then, finally, exhausted and defeated, you surrender. You stop pushing. You let go of the effort, let go of the assumption, let go of the fight. You take a breath and step back. And in that moment of stillness, you actually see the door for the first time. You see the handle. You see the sign. With a light, easy motion, requiring almost no effort, you pull the handle, and the door swings open silently, revealing a vast, beautiful garden on the other side. This is the life of letting go. The suffering was never in the door. It was in the pushing. Freedom comes not from overpowering the door, but from seeing it clearly and acting in harmony with its true nature. It is absolutely crucial to understand that this path of letting go, of non-attachment, is not a path of indifference. This is the most common misunderstanding, and it is the complete opposite of the truth. Indifference is a cold, withdrawn state. It is a form of aversion, another way of pushing the world away. It says, "I don't care, it doesn't matter. This is just another kind of prison." True non-attachment, the open hand, is the very foundation for the deepest, most authentic, and most courageous engagement with life. It is the freedom to love more fully, not less. When your own happiness is not dependent on another person's actions or affection, you are free to love them for who they are, not for what they do for you. You can offer your heart completely, without the fear and jealousy that comes from clinging. It is a love born of generosity, not of need. It is the freedom to work more passionately, not less. When you are not attached to the outcome, to the promotion, to the fame, to the victory, you are free to dedicate yourself to the work itself with a pure and joyful heart. You can work for justice, for truth, for beauty, simply because it is the right thing to do. You can persevere through setbacks because your spirit is nourished by the integrity of your effort, not the fickle rewards of the world. It allows you to stay engaged for the long haul, immune to the burnout that comes from constant frustration and disappointment. The life of the open hand is not an empty life. It is a life that is completely open to the totality of the human experience. We finally have the courage and the stability to be present for it all. The joy and the sorrow, the success and the failure, the pleasure and the pain. We no longer need to run from the difficult parts or desperately cling to the pleasant ones. We can meet it all with a balanced mind and a compassionate heart. This is the freedom of the mountain that is unmoved by the winds. This is the freedom of the river that flows around obstacles without struggle. This is the quiet joy of the musk deer that has finally realized the source of the fragrance is its own being. It is the peace of the wise gardener who tends the soil of her own heart. It is the beauty of the kintsugi bowl, made stronger and more valuable at its broken places. This open-handed way of living is not a final destination to be reached, but a path to be walked moment by moment with each breath we take. It is a continuous practice of returning to presence, to kindness, and to the profound wisdom of letting go. Let us now, in closing, gather the threads of this entire journey from the first recognition of our heavy burden to this discovery of a light, paradoxical, and liberating freedom. We began our journey together on a vast and quiet shore. with the simple image of a clenched fist, struggling to hold onto a handful of sand. We have traveled far since that moment. We have looked with courage at the invisible backpack we carry, and we have named the heavy stones inside the regrets, the anxieties, the rigid beliefs, the painful resentments. We followed the path of the wise physician, diagnosing the deep, underlying ache of our lives as dukkha, and identifying its root cause in the relentless, feverish thirst of tanha. We learned that this thirst is doomed to be unquenchable, for it seeks to grasp a solid and permanent reality in a universe defined by the constant, flowing river of impermanence, Anicca. And we dared to ask the most profound question of all, looking for the solid self who was doing all this clinging, only to find the spacious, liberating truth of Anatta, no self. This was not just a philosophical journey. It has been a practical one. We have learned to use the gentle light of mindfulness to see our own minds clearly. We have learned to meet the inevitable storms of life with the courageous embrace of acceptance and to cultivate the inner strength of a mountain that is unmoved by the 8 worldly winds. And we have learned to water the seeds of our own heart with the unconditional healing warmth of loving kindness, or Metta. The path has led us, step by step, from the clenched fist of fear and control to the open, graceful hand of release. And so we arrive at the great final secret, the core message at the heart of this entire journey. It is this: peace is not a destination you must travel to. It is not an achievement to be won, nor a prize to be acquired after a life of perfect practice. Peace is your original nature. Imagine a deep, clear lake. The water is naturally still, transparent, and peaceful. Our clinging, our fears, our judgments, and our incessant thinking are like stirring the lakebed with a stick, churning up the mud and silt until the water becomes murky and turbulent. The spiritual path is not about adding a clarifying chemical to the water. It is simply about putting down the stick. It is about stopping the incessant stirring. When we learn to let the mind be, when we let go of the grasping, the mud naturally settles on its own. The clarity, the peace, the quiet joy that we have been searching for reveals itself. It has been here within you all along. This is not the end of a journey, but the beginning of a way of life. Letting go is not a single, grand act, but a continuous practice, a choice that is available to you in every single moment. Each breath is an invitation to return to the present. Every challenging emotion is an opportunity to practice acceptance. Every interaction with another person is a chance to offer kindness. The hand will clench again out of old, deep habit. But now, you know this. You can see it happening. And with that awareness, you now possess the gentle wisdom to notice the tension and to choose once more to open your hand. The tools are now yours. The path is beneath your feet. The quiet, unshakable peace you seek is waiting patiently within your own heart, ready to be uncovered.